What if Edward faced the night beyond redemption? Part 3. Carlyle's face was solemn. He wrung his hands nervously as all the variables of the pregnancy and delivery ran through his mind. It's not going to be easy. We have to be ready for anything. So what do you suggest? I prompted. Carlyle looked up. The nature of this delivery is inherently dangerous. There are risks both to Bella and the fetus. If she continues on her present schedule, she will deliver in the next few days. A few days. I had already known that our timeline was rapidly dwindling. But to hear the words out loud was a bit jarring. 3 days, 4 at the most. 72 hours. So little time left before the possibility of losing her forever became a near certainty. I feared had no amount of preparation would deliver us a happy ending, but even against the insurmountable odds, I would do whatever it took to ensure success. We need to plan for the worst-case scenario, Carlyle continued. We need a plan for delivery and also a plan for saving Bella. In this case, saving her would mean changing her. He paused, his thoughts saddened by the idea. Edward, are you prepared for that? I looked into my father's eyes. I saw the sadness in them. It matched the sorrow in my own. I had never wanted her to become like me. I had never wanted to steal the warmth from her skin, the beat of her heart, the purity of her soul. Even though we had agreed that she had made me promise that she would one day become like me, the thought still broke my long-dead heart. I nodded weakly. I'll do whatever it takes. Good. Carlyle nodded and took a deep breath. Then we need to create our plan in 2 stages. The first will be the delivery of the baby. The second will be to protect the life of the mother. Would the delivery proceed as a normal pregnancy would? Esme asked. Carlyle pursed his lips and shook his head. We know very little about the nature of the child Bella's carrying. But one thing the legends have made clear is the child's strength, which we have already witnessed. He paused, glancing up at me with tired eyes. The other thing mentioned in all of T's legends is that the mothers do not survive the process. Oh dear. Cowray's thoughts flooded back to me, her recollections of her people's stories, of the legends of mothers torn apart by the demons spawned within them. The grotesque images swam before my eyes and I had to lower my head into my hands, rubbing my eyes with my palms in a vain attempt to block them out. Rather than allowing the baby to be born naturally, since we are unsure of what that will entail in this instance, I would highly recommend a delivery by cesarean. It's the only way to ensure that we can maintain a relatively controlled environment, except for the barrier surrounding the fetus, I added. Carlyle nodded. That does pose a problem. We don't know for certain, but judging by the information we haven't been able to gather about the protective barrier around the fetus, its nature is most likely similar to our own skin. And based on the legends, the baby will break through that barrier with its teeth, Emmett finished, shuddering as he said the words. Gross. Correct. So the only way for the thing to be delivered is for it to eat its way out? I asked. Yes. Carlyle was right. If the monster within her was going to tear her apart on its journey into this life, then we had no choice but to take matters in our own hands. But how could we control such a creature? I knew that Rosalie and Esme and especially Bella were imagining a sweet infant that would coo and cry like any normal baby would. The only images I saw in my mind were that of a feral newborn vampire, tiny and vicious, tearing at anything it could get its teeth into. And if we're trying to control the situation, I continued, the only way for us to break through the barrier and deliver it without it causing unnecessary damage to Bella is to what use our teeth. I glanced around the room at my family, at their dark eyes, at the growing thirst in the back of their minds. To create an incision in Bella's abdomen. To perform the cesarean would be dangerous enough, but to taunt the temptation by putting ourselves so close to the free flow of blood, I could only see this ending in pain and suffering for all involved. I'm afraid so, Carlyle replied. The only thing strong enough to break through our skin is our teeth or the wolves. I'm not letting a wolf's teeth get anywhere near her. I seethed. No, of course not. Carlyle quickly agreed. Carlyle, isn't there another way? Esme asked. It sounds too dangerous for both of them. Who's going to be the one? Alice began. None of us have fed old even Carlyle have the control necessary when we've gone so long without feeding. I'll do it, he answered. Although Edward and Rosalie both have the medical training, I have the most experience and the strongest sense of control. I can focus on the delivery if Edward can focus on the second portion of our plan. Saving Bella, I whispered. Carlyle nodded. Carlyle, you're going to need to feed, Esme worried. If he's responsible for something happening to her, that would be ideal. And how can we ensure that Bella survives the process? I pressed. Can we take any measures to ensure the venom's success? The faster the venom spreads through her bloodstream and into her heart, the quicker it will begin to work. I would recommend delivering the venom at several key points, Carlyle replied. I imagined having to bite her repeatedly to mar her perfect, ivory skin with my own teeth. I knew that the hunger would not be an issue, but I still felt uncertain about the level of success I could achieve. I needed a certainty, a guarantee. What would be the absolutely quickest way to deliver the venom to her heart? Maybe, Carlyle, would it be possible to inject the venom straight into her heart? I asked. To do what? Well, he hesitated. I don't believe it's ever been done before, but it would certainly speed up the process. We would have to collect the venom and store it in something that won't degrade, certainly not plastic or glass. I do have some antique brass syringes in my study. That may work. So, that's what we'll do, I agreed. It was my best chance. I had to be as prepared as absolutely possible. Both Bella's life and my own were hanging in the balance. I would do what I had to save her, but the thought of putting her through that pain, of watching her suffer for 3 days, I didn't know if I would be strong enough to witness that. We'll need to discuss all of this with Bella, I added. She'll do whatever she needs to do for the baby, Rosalie replied. Regardless, I growled, she still has a choice. Weren't you the one who told me that? Stop being petty. Rosalie crossed her arms and harumphed in irritation. Should we wake her? Esme asked. I shook my head. Not yet. Let her sleep. Seth continued to snore when Bella woke a few hours later to a grumbling stomach. While she ate another plate of eggs and a fresh cupful of blood. Carlyle explained what was discussed while she was sleeping. She seemed to take it all in stride, just as Rosalie said she would. She really would do anything for that creature growing inside her. I never suspected that Bella would have such a strong maternal instinct, but I guessed it shouldn't have come as any big surprise given her penchant to care for others. Will it hurt? She asked. I mean, I know it will, but it will be painful. Yes, Carlyle replied. However, I believe that if I can administer morphine in advance of the venom, it will help to ease the pain somewhat. Really, I attempted it when Emmett was changed, but the morphine wasn't given adequate time to spread before the venom burned it off. We'll need to administer an anesthetic in preparation for the cesarean. I believe with an ample dose and sufficient time for it to spread through your bloodstream, it would help to ease the pain of the change. It's worth a try, I encouraged. Okay, she nodded. It sounds like we're ready, or at least ready whenever he is. She smiled, rubbing her belly. I don't think anything could adequately prepare me for what was to come in the next few days. We hadn't even discussed what would be done with the monster once it was born. I had little faith that we could control it, a newborn vampire, too young to have any moral inclinations. It would thrive on blood and feed without hesitation or remorse. Sam and his pack were right to fear such a creature. The day progressed without significant event. Contrary to Carlyle's instructions, Bella continued to hide her discomfort. Her body temperature continued to fluctuate, and she would shift from leaning on my shoulder to leaning on Seth, depending on how hot or cold she felt at the time. As the seconds ticked by, I did my best to remain calm. To savor these moments with her. Even with a plan in place, I had little faith in it. I had to prepare myself for the possibility that she would not survive. Although, I didn't believe that any amount of planning on my part could prepare me for that end. Like those who watch a loved one waste away at the hands of a terminal illness, knowing that the end is inevitable when the end comes. The knowledge that it was coming still doesn't ease the sting of loss. The sun had already fallen well below the horizon when Seth finally awoke. It was likely the raised voices that roused him from his slumber. With the exception of Rosalie, the rest of our family had left the room, not wishing to get into the middle of our heated discussion. Bella, I don't think it's a good idea, I pressed. I want to talk to Charlie, she insisted. Esme said he's been calling and I can't stand for him to worry. Don't you think that keeping contact will only make the separation more difficult? How could you get his hopes up and then dash them when he hears word of your death? Because he won't. She crossed her arms defiantly. What do you mean he won't? You can't keep contact with him after the change. Did you forget that your skills of observation likely come from him? He will notice that you've changed. And you won't be able to see him for several years. How will you explain your absence? We'll make up some excuse. I know that I can't be around him, but I could call him. He thinks I have a rare disease, right? Well, then, we tell him that Carlyle is sending me to a special hospital somewhere on the other side of the world for treatment. And when you do come back here, what then? I asked. You do remember that the venom will change your appearance. She pursed her lips and her brow furrowed. I know, she breathed. And I know I can't tell him. But what? Well, when Jacob first phased, he wasn't allowed to tell me what he was. He reminded me of a story he had told me once and he made me guess. I can do the same thing with Charlie. And what if he guesses correctly? What then? Do you want the Volturi to go after your father? He won't, she insisted. You yourself said that the stories about vampires aren't based on many facts. Most of them are terribly flawed. You don't fit the profile. Charlie will come up with an explanation in his mind, but it won't be the right one. Bella, please. She shook her head. My mind is made up. I can do this. But what I can't do is listen to him worry all the time. I need to reassure him, ease his anxiety. I looked over at Seth, who was staring wide-eyed at the both of us. His thoughts were a jumbled mess, vacillating between agreement with me and understanding of her perspective as well. Fine, I grumbled, placing the phone in her palm. She smiled as she began dialing the familiar number, and I cringed when I heard her father's voice answer. Bella, is that you? He asked. It's me, Dad. Esme said you called. How are you? Fine, but the question is, how are you? How are you feeling? I hadn't heard from you. I was getting worried. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I was sleeping when you called. I'm starting to feel better though, on the mend. I could listen any longer. Bella shook her head as I stood, and I could feel Seth's eyes on me as I climbed the stairs to Carlisle's study. He was busily prepping his office for the impending cesarean, wanting to be prepared at a moment's notice. He looked up at me when I let myself fall into one of the leather chairs. Are you okay? I shook my head. Nothing that had happened since we discovered the pregnancy could be remotely described as okay. She's talking to Charlie, I grumbled. He hummed under his breath. And you don't think she should? She'll get his hopes up. Carlisle, it will only make things more difficult for him. It sounded like she already has a plan to deal with that. A ridiculous plan, I muttered. Granted, this is strange territory that we find ourselves in, Carlisle mused. Not one of us had any choice in the matter. We were all thrust into this life without our own consent. We never had the opportunity to say goodbye to our lives. To choose how we would exit this human existence. But she does. Granted, it may be a far-fetched arrangement for her to maintain some contact with her old life, but I don't think it would be right of us to deny her at least the chance. I wonder if her preparation will affect how well she will acclimate after the change. I shrugged. Of course Carlisle would be a BLE to boil down her actions to the very basic of human needs. She may be a married woman, soon to be a mother, but in many ways she was still a child, a girl who wasn't ready to let go of her father. Let's change the subject, shall we? While you're here, would you like to prepare the syringe? He asked. I looked up, and in his hands he held a large metal syringe. It glinted in the lamplight, surprising given its age. It was perhaps older than I was. I nodded, not knowing how many other opportunities I would have to step away from her side, and if Carlisle was already preparing the operating table in the case of preterm labor, then there was no time to waste. He placed the cylinder in my palm. The cool metal rolled around on the surface of my hand before I gripped my fingers around it and pulled out the plunger. I held the opening to my lips, allowing the free flow of venom to pool in my mouth and slip through my lips into the small tube. Given my level of thirst, it took no time to fill the vial with the dangerous, took it from me and sealed it, placing it next to the various scalpels and other instruments on the tray beside the bed. Good, he thought. It was a good idea, the syringe. I nodded before standing to return to Bella. Her conversation with her father was nearing its end. I had tried to block it out, to ignore the reassurances she gave him, but they still rang in my ears. She was so optimistic, so sure. How could she be so sure that everything would work out? I certainly wasn't. Ed was standing when I re-entered the room. I need to go, he said. Jake was expecting me at dusk. Man, he's gonna kill me, or worse, Leah will. Here, Esme said as she ran into the room and placed a small bundle of sandwiches in his hands. In case you're hungry. Thank you. Will you ask Jacob to come back? Bella asked. Seth turned. Sure thing. Yes, please, Alice echoed. It's so much better when one of you is here. I'm tired of hanging out in the attic like a vampire bat in the belfry. I would understand if he decided not to, Bella lied. I know it's hard for him. I don't think he could disappoint you, I assured her. He'll be here, Seth added. With that, he turned and left, carrying the bundle of food under his arm. With no wolves present to make the murky waters of Alice's mind clear, she exiled herself to the highest floor of the house. Esme busied herself in the kitchen, preparing dinner for Bella while Rosalie handed her yet another cup of blood. It was a wonder that there was any left. I was certain the stores Carlyle had secured would be depleted very soon if they hadn't been already. I lowered myself to the seat beside Bella. She had wrapped herself up in blankets once again, immediately feeling the chill left by Seth's absence. She ripped the cup in her hands with frozen fingers, seeking the warmth that the heated liquid provided. She took a sip before glancing over at me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. For what? She certainly had no reason to apologize to me. If anything, it was I who should be begging forgiveness for putting her into this predicament in the first place. "I know you're upset with me for the decisions I've made," she said. "But I couldn't leave Charlie in the dark, not completely. You do realize that this will make it harder on him, don't you?" She shrugged. "I think that some contact is better than none. I think that knowing I'm safe and improving will be enough for him. It's dangerous. You could be putting us all at risk of exposure." "I know," she murmured. She was silent for a moment, tugging on her bottom lip with her teeth and fingering the edges of the blanket nervously. "I just want everyone to be happy. And where does that leave me?" I blurted out, immediately regretting my hasty words. Her brows pinched together. "Of course I want you to be happy. I love you. And this," she paused, rubbing her belly, "this is your baby too. I wanted a chance to give you something that you never thought you could have. Honestly, I didn't think I could have it either. But at what cost? What if I lose you?" "You won't. You don't know that." She closed her eyes and the corners of her eyes pinched. "Bella, are you in pain?" She held up a hand and shook her head. "No," she panted. "I just need to Rosalie." Rosalie appeared an instant later with a worried expression on her face. She seemed to recognize the look in Bella's eyes. "Bathroom." Without words, Rosalie lifted Bella up in her arms and began walking from the room. I raked my fingers through my hair. Bella either didn't understand or didn't care that her life was at risk. Was the thing growing inside her that important? She had tried time and again to explain it to me, but I still couldn't understand it. Esme sat down, eyed me and wrapped a comforting arm around my shoulders. "I'm sorry," she thought. "She must hate me," I grumbled, lowering my head into my hands. "I know this is hard, but she could never hate you. She loves you too much. I just feel so helpless." "You're doing the best you can," she soothed. "That's all anyone could ask." I allowed myself a moment to wallow in my own self-pity in Bella's absence. Esme remained at my side, tightly gripping my shoulders, almost as though she knew I was about to fall apart and she was trying to hold me together. "Where's Bella? Did something happen?" "Oh no, she's all right," I whispered, answering Jacob's question. Or, the same, I should say. "Oh good, he came back." "Hello, Jacob," Esme greeted. "I'm so glad you came back." "Me, too," Alice chorused as her lithe footsteps descended the stairs. Hey," Jacob replied awkwardly. "Where's Bella?" "Bathroom," Alice answered. "Mostly fluid diet, you know. Plus, the whole pregnancy thing does that to you, I hear." One leaves and another takes his place." "Oh, wonderful," Rosalie grumbled. I knew I smelled something nasty. I saw the reflection of Bella's face through Jacob's mind and the way her face lit up when she saw him. "It's so unfair," he thought. "Jacob," Bella exclaimed. "You came." "Hi, Bells." I stood as Rosalie lay Bella down on the couch. Her face went pale and she held her breath as she sank down into the cushions. She stretched out, as her belly had become too large for her to sit up comfortably. Her heart skipped a beat and her intake of breath was shallow, as though her lungs were not inflating to their full capacity. I ran my head across her forehead. There was a light sheen of perspiration coating her skin and the low-grade fever was still present. She shivered beneath my fingertips. "Are you cold?" "I'm fine," she whispered. "Bella, you know what Carlyle told you," Rosalie reminded her. "Don't downplay anything. It doesn't help us take care of either of you." Bella smiled weakly, looking sheepish. "Okay, I'm a little cold. Edward, can you hand me that blanket?" She gestured to the quilt laying across the arm on the other end of the couch. "Seriously, isn't that sort of the point of me being here?" Jacob asked. "You just walked in. After running all day, I'd bet. Put your feet up for a minute. I'll probably warm up again in no time." Jacob rolled his eyes, ignoring her and moving to sit next to her. How is she still telling me what to do? He wondered. His movements were cautious. He could see how frail she had become and, like me, wondered if she would shatter at the slightest touch. He wrapped one of her frigid hands in his and placed the other on her face, doing an examination of his own. "Does she feel cooler than usual?" "Thanks, Jake," she murmured. "Yeah." I felt his eyes on me for a moment before he looked back at Bella. His thoughts briefly flitted to his hunger and his stomach grumbled for emphasis. Watch this, Edward. Rosalie, why don't you get Jacob something from the kitchen? Alice asked from her seat behind the couch. You can't be serious. I do not cater to dogs. Rosalie stared at Alice as though she had lost her mind. Food from her? No way. Thanks, anyway, Alice. But I don't think I'd want to eat something Blondie's spit in. I'd bet my system wouldn't take too kindly to venom. Rosalie would never embarrass Esme by displaying such a lack of hospitality. Well, if that's how we're going to be, two can play at that game. Of course not, Rosalie agreed. If the dog's hungry, then let him eat like one. I could already see an idea forming in Rosalie's mind. Although it was not entirely formed, I cited my sister's pettiness. You would think that she would show at least an inkling of gratitude for all Jacob and the wolves had done for us. I wondered absently as she and Leah would get along. Their shared animosity would at least provide them with some common ground. You'd tell me if it was poisoned, right? Jacob asked, almost jokingly, but with an air of uncertainty. Yes, I promised. The scent of charred meat reached my nostrils, but I hid my grimace at the odor. The scent was followed by the loud groaning of bending metal. Esme would not be pleased that Rosalie was destroying one of her mixing bowls in such a fashion. There, that should do it, Rosalie thought. If the dog wants a meal, then that's what he'll get. The harsh, shrill sound of her fingernails scratching asking the surface if the newly fashioned dog bowl elicited a small smile as I watched her etch the word Fido into its side. Rosalie returned a moment later, pleased with herself as she set the bowl on the floor next to Jacob. Alice snickered under her breath. Enjoy, mongrel. Jacob admired her handiwork with amusement, but decided not to give her the satisfaction of getting a rise out of him. Thanks, Blondie, he said with a smirk. She huffed, rolling her eyes. Hey, do you know what you call a blonde with a brain? A golden retriever. Her self-satisfied smirk faded. I've heard that one, too. I'll keep trying. Rosalie stalked away, irritated, while Jacob began to eat. The room was silent, except for the sound of his hewing and the light hum of the television. It was fascinating to listen to the evolution of Jacob's thoughts. It seemed the more time he spent in our presence, the more acclimated he became and the less antipathy he felt. Even something like our scent, that repelled him in an instinctual level, was beginning to have less of an impact. Bella began fingering the hair at the back of his neck as he finished his meal. Time for a haircut, huh? He asked. You're getting a little shaggy, she murmured. Maybe, let me guess, someone around here used to cut hair in a salon in Paris. My money's on Alice. Probably. Bella chuckled. No thanks. He shook his head. I'm good for a few more weeks. But what about her? How long? He shrugged awkwardly, avoiding looking anyone in the eyes. So what's the, date? You know, the due date for the little monster. I had to agree with his perfunctory assessment of the unborn child, but Bella didn't appear to be amused as she reached up to lightly smack him on the back of the head. He ignored her pitiful attempt at a reprimand. I'm serious, he insisted. I want to know how long I'm gonna have to be here. How long you're gonna be here? I don't know, she answered. Not exactly. Obviously, we're not going with the 9-month model here, and we can't get an ultrasound, so Carlisle is guesstimating from how big I am. Normal people are supposed to be about 40 centimeters here when the baby is fully grown. She ran her finger over the height of her belly. 1 centimeter for every week. I was 30 this morning, and I've been gaining about 2 centimeters a day. Sometimes more. 2 weeks to a day flying by fast forward. How many days does that give her? 4. Jacob's face began to pale as he realized just how little time Bella had left. You okay? Bella asked. Jacob managed a weak nod, but remained silent, his mind reeling. Like me, he had little faith that Bella would survive the birth. He had tried to maintain his distance. Out of respect for Bella's decision to be with me, but more so to protect his already damaged heart from breaking again. But now, knowing that her time was so limited, it made it exponentially more difficult for him to stay away. He recalled his conversation with Seth, the notion that we could flee Forks for safety from retaliation by the pack, intolerable not knowing, wondering if they were to take away 1 or 2 or 3 of those 4 days. My 4 days. It was intriguing to hear that Bella's hold on his heart had only seemed to increase with time. Although his thoughts of her had troubled me in the past, now I understood him. I felt pity for him. It was cruel for his heart to cling so tightly to something that was slipping away. But it was yet another reminder that I, too, was losing her. If I had been in Jacob's shoes, I would not have wanted 1 second with her to be stolen from me. A moment later, he realized that he was crying as Bella reached up to wipe away a tear from his cheek. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. Her words were hollow, falling on disbelieving ears. "Right," Jacob grumbled. "I didn't think you would come," she said, ignoring his doubt. "Seth said you would, and so did Edward. But I didn't believe them." "Why not? You're not happy here, but you came anyway. You wanted me here." "I know," Bella sighed. "But you didn't have to come, because it's not fair for me to want you here." "I would have understood." After a few moments of awkward silence, Bella spoke again. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Why am I here? It just hurts." "Can I ask you something?" Jacob asked. She nodded. "Of course." Jacob hesitated, knowing I would hear his mind, but still not wishing to embarrass himself by saying it aloud. "Why do you want me here?" he asked. "Seth could keep you warm. And he's probably easier to be around, happy little punk. But when I walk in the door, you smile like I'm your favorite person in the world." "You're one of them. That sucks, you know," he grumbled. I could sympathize with Jacob. Before I knew with any certainty that Bella had chosen me, I felt much the same when she spent time with Jacob, to love her from a distance, to be a part of her life. But be forced to share her with another. "Yeah," she sighed. "Sorry." "Why, though?" "You didn't answer that." I listened for Bella's reply. I had been wondering to myself why she wanted Jacob to be here. I knew that he was her close friend, but she must have known that she was hurting him. "It feels complete when you're here, Jacob. Like all my family is together." "I mean, I guess that's what it's like. I've never had a big family before now." "It's nice, but it's just not whole unless you're here." "I'll never be a part of your family, Bella." "I could have been. You've always been a part of my family." She disagreed. "That's a crap answer," he spat, suddenly angry, not that I could blame him. "What's a good one?" he snorted. "How about, Jacob, I get a kick out of your pain." She recoiled. "You'd like that better," she whispered. "It's easier, at least. I could wrap my head around it. I could deal with it." We got off track, Jake. "Out of balance. You're supposed to be part of my life. I can feel that, and so can you, but not like this." "We did something wrong." "No, I did something wrong, and we got off track." Her voice trailed off and, a moment later, became a quiet snore. I felt sorry for Jacob, for the pain he endured, watching his best friend marry another. She said they had gotten off track, and I knew why. It wasn't her fault. It was mine. One fateful mistake, possibly one of the worst mistakes in my century in this life, was leaving. If I had never left, Bella and Jacob would likely not have grown as close as they are now. It was my action that forced them together. So many events were set in motion by that one decision. In hindsight, I knew that I had overreacted, that I should have listened to the advice of my family. And because of my rash decision to leave, others were continuing to pay the price. Like a traveler through time crushing a butterfly underfoot, I had effectively created the ripple that had become a tidal wave in so many lives. Jacob stared a moment at the now sleeping Bella, her words still stinging. "She's exhausted," I offered. "It's been a long day. A hard day." "I think she would have gone to sleep earlier, but she was waiting for you." "Seth said it broke another of her ribs," he said, his voice deadened, as though the news were nothing more than what he expected. "Yes," I sighed. "It's making it hard for her to breathe." "Great." I shoved my hands in my pockets, suddenly feeling strangely awkward. "Let me know when she gets hot again." "Yeah," Jacob mumbled, not bothering to look up, his focus instead on the goosebumps that ran the length of Bella's arm. Noting his thoughts, I picked up one of the blankets Esme had set on the arm of the couch and draped it over her. Well, the mind-reading thing saves time, at least, Jacob thought. I crossed the room to the window, looking out into the quiet wilderness, its serenity juxtaposing the torment that roiled within me. Jacob's thoughts quickly turned to Charlie. Seth must have told him of the conversation Bella had with her father and her intentions to maintain contact, even after her change. It seemed that he and I shared the same optimism for the conclusion to this pregnancy and the same anger over the unnecessary pain her plan would cause. What a mess. Yes, I nodded. It's not a good idea. Then why? She's only making it worse. She can't bear his anxiety. So it's better. No, I shook my head sadly. It's not better, but I'm not going to force her to do anything that makes her unhappy now. Whatever happens, this makes her feel better. I'll deal with the rest afterward. It's not right. She must have some other plan. She's very sure she's going to live, I offered. But not human, he countered. No, not human, but she hopes to see Charlie again, anyway. Oh, This just gets better and better, see. Charlie, he spat the words through his teeth. Afterwards, see Charlie when she's all sparkly white with the bright red eyes. I'm not a bloodsucker, so maybe I'm missing something, but Charlie seems like kind of a strange choice for her first meal. I sighed, Jacob's exasperation echoing my own. She knows she won't be able to be near him for at least a year. She thinks she can stall. Tell Charlie she has to go to a special hospital on the other side of the world. Keep in contact through phone calls. That's insane. Yes, I agreed. Charlie's not stupid. Even if she doesn't kill him, he's going to notice a difference. She's sort of banking on that. He stared at me as though I had lost my mind. He wouldn't be very far off base. She wouldn't be aging, of course, so that would set a time limit, even if Charlie accepted whatever excuse she comes up with for the changes. Do you remember when you tried to tell her about your transformation? How you made her guess? She told you about that? Yes, I nodded. She was explaining her idea. You see, she's not allowed to tell Charlie the truth. It would be very dangerous for him. But he's a smart, practical man. She thinks he'll come up with his own explanation. She assumes he'll get it wrong. After all, we hardly adhere to vampire canon. He'll make some wrong assumption about us, like she did in the beginning, and we'll go along with it. She thinks she'll be able to see him from time to time. He shook his head in disbelief. Insane, he mumbled under his breath. Yes, he's weak to let her have her way like this, he thought. He tumbled the idea over and over in his mind in an attempt to understand my reasoning. It didn't take long at all for him to determine that I was merely making her happy, believing that she wouldn't live long enough to execute her plans. I'll deal with whatever comes, I whispered. I won't cause her pain now. Jacob let out a slow breath. 4 days, he asked. Approximately. Then what? I didn't know where he was going with this. What do you mean, exactly? His thoughts dwelled on what little he had gleaned about the pregnancy and the creature growing within her. How does that work? How does it get out? From what little research we've been able to do, it would appear the creatures use their own teeth to escape the womb. Jacob swallowed loudly. Research. That's why you haven't seen Jasper and Emmett around. That's what Carlisle is doing now. Trying to decipher ancient stories and myths. As much as we can with what we have to work with here, looking for anything that might help us predict the creature's behavior. Stories. If there are myths, then is this thing not the first of its kind? I finished. Maybe. It's all very sketchy. The myths could easily be the products of fear and imagination. Though your myths are true, are they not? Perhaps these are, too. They do seem to be localized. Linked. But, how did you find? There was a woman we encountered in South America. She'd been raised in the traditions of her people. She'd heard warnings about such creatures. Old stories that had been passed down. Jacob's eyes grew wide and I could hear the fear in his voice. What were the warnings? Cowray's memories flooded back, giving me a fresh glimpse, say, of the gore her imagination evoked by the telling of those stories. I briefly squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the images away. That the creature must be killed immediately, before it could gain too much strength. Just like Sam thought. But was he right? I shrugged. Of course, their legends say the same of us. That we must be destroyed. That we are soulless murderers. 2 for 2. I laughed at the sarcasm in Jacob's thoughts. Irritated with myself for hoping that he would think of us as anything other than monsters. Of course, why would he bother to give credence to the notion when I, myself, felt much the same? No matter how we tried to overcome our nature, it would never change what we are. Bella groaned in her sleep, as though for emphasis. What did their stories say about the mothers? Jacob asked. The emotions I had been struggling to keep at bay flooded forth at his words. Images from Cowray's memories, from what research we had been able to gather, and from my own nightmare. Shish daydreams overwhelmed me and I had to squeeze my eyes shut, leaning against the glass facade for support before my feet could give out. Of course there were no survivors, Rosalie answered, her voice cold and detached. Giving birth in the middle of a disease-infested swamp with a medicine man smearing sloth spit across your face to drive out the evil spirits was never the safest method. Even the normal births went badly half the time. None of them had what this baby has: caregivers with an idea of what the baby needs, who try to meet those needs. A doctor with a totally unique knowledge of vampire nature. A plan in place to deliver the baby as safely as possible. Venom that will repair anything that goes wrong. The baby will be fine. And those other mothers would probably have survived. If they'd had that, if they even existed in the first place. Something I'm not convinced of. With each syllable, my anger built. My sorrow turned to rage as I listened to my sister so callously explain away the dangers as though they were inconsequential, as though the pain and danger was worth the potential sacrifice of Bella's life. For what? To bring another monster into the world, one we couldn't possibly conceive of controlling, and one that would likely expose us all. It wouldn't be the first time, but I found myself wishing that the Volturi had done away with me back in Italy, when I had requested they end my existence. So much pain and suffering could have been avoided if they had just granted my single appeal. What my sister failed to see was not just the loss of Bella, but the potential death of us all at the hands of vampire law. The baby, is that all that matters? How could she? I could feel Jacob's eyes on me as I spun around in a crouch, ready to charge myself at Rosalie. Allow me. I watched with some manner of curiosity as Jacob lifted the bowl Rosalie had to carefully crafted and threw it right into the back of her head, creating a satisfying clang as it fell against her skull and ricocheted across the room. Dumb blonde, Jacob muttered under his breath. Rosalie turned to face Jacob, the fury on her face bordering on comical. You got food in my hair, she seethed. I found myself smiling as Jacob burst into laughter and Alice followed shortly behind. Emmett appeared at the top of the stairs, frowning slightly when he took in the scene below, but fighting back a chuckle as well. In all the commotion, Bella began to stir and I cringed as she slowly opened her eyes, wincing as she awoke to the ever-present discomfort. What's so funny? She mumbled. Jacob reined in his laughter long enough to reply. I got food in her hair. I'm not going to forget this, dog, Rosalie sneered. 'S not so hard to erase a blonde's memory, he retorted. Just blow in her ear. Get some new jokes, she snapped. Luckily her angry reply drowned out the quiet laughter that Emmett was so desperately trying to hold in. Come on, Jake, Bella grumbled. Avenue Rose Aloe. Her speech was halted by a sudden gasp for air. Her face contorted in a grimace of pain as her back arched upward. I crossed the room and threw back the blanket, unsure if I was prepared for what would lay beneath the folds of fabric. He's just stretching, she managed before clenching her teeth together. I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach that there was something much worse going on than just stretching. I placed my hands on either side of her face, hoping my touch would soothe her. Carlyle, I called. He appeared at my side, the concern on his face matching my own. Right here. Okay, Bella sighed. Think it's over. She managed a tight smile that looked more like a grimace as she gingerly patted her swollen belly. Poor kid doesn't have enough room, that's all. He's getting so big. It won't be much longer, Carlyle thought. I'm concerned about the internal damage that the fetus could inadvertently cause if we continue to wait for labor to begin naturally. My eyes tightened as I glanced between Carlyle and Rosalie, knowing full well that she would fight ardently against any attempt to induce labor. How can she talk about it like that? Makes me wish I could throw something at Bella too. My eyes met with Jacob's for a fraction of a second, both in warning and in agreement. It seemed that even something as brash as that would have little effect on Bella's resolve. You know, he reminds me of you, Jake, she whispered. Do not compare me to that thing. He spat. She shook her head slightly. I just meant your growth spurt, she explained. You shot right up. I could watch you getting taller by the minute. He's like that, too. Growing so fast. I could hear the turmoil in Jacob's mind as he mulled over her words, but my focus was on her. We breathed a collective sigh of relief when the pain appeared to subside and she eased herself back into the cushions. It is an intriguing comparison, Carlyle mused. I wonder if there are more similarities than we realize, if the knowledge we have of the wolves' physiology of their genetics could help us to better understand what we're dealing with. Jacob's train of thought was broken and he turned to Carlyle. What? You know that I was wondering about the fetus's genetic makeup, Jacob. About his chromosomes. What of it? Jacob asked, seeming confused. Well, taking your similarities into consideration. Jacob bolted upright. Similarities. There's more than one. Carlyle raised a hand in defense. The accelerated growth, and the fact that Alice cannot see either of you. Well, I wonder if that means that we have an answer. If the similarities are gene deep. Carlyle's musings continued. If a human has 23 pairs of chromosomes and we have 25 pairs, then it stands to reason that, like Jacob, the fetus would have 24 pairs, I finished. You don't know that, Jacob argued. No, Carlyle agreed, but it's interesting to speculate. Jacob rolled his eyes. Yeah, just fascinating. With much relief, the evening passed without incident. Bella slumbered quietly with only the occasional hint of distress in her breathing. Jacob didn't sleep quite as soundly even in his dreams. He was a focused protector, formulating a plan to lead Carlisle to the life-saving blood we would need for what we hoped would be a safe delivery. Shortly before sunrise, Bella's face began to flush and a light perspiration broke out across her brow. I placed my palm against her forehead and felt the fever rushing into my cool skin. Careful not to wake her. I lightly jostled Jacob awake as I eased myself next to her. He yawned widely, stretching his arms above his head before rising from the couch. Might as well get to work, he thought. Thank you, I whispered, acknowledging that I had seen Jacob's plans in his mind. If the route is clear, they'll go today. Jacob nodded. I'll let you know. He disappeared into the darkness. My hopes going with him that he would be successful in his plans. Carlisle appeared and sat in the chair across the room. He pinched his brow before rubbing his thumb and index finger over his weary eyes. Although we could not physically tire, it was evident that the situation we found ourselves in had drained us all emotionally. He looked up at me with pitch-black eyes, yet even with the hunger so apparent, it remained an inconsequential thought in his mind. You need to feed, I whispered. He nodded tiredly. And we need to replenish our stores for Bella. We won't be able to wait much longer. Jacob has a plan, I offered. They're running a perimeter as we speak, determining the presence Sam's pack has or has not maintained around the territory. If he believes you can exit safely, he will let us know. Carlisle nodded, a weak smile curving the corners of his mouth. That's good. Today would be best. We don't want to be caught unprepared. I feared that no amount of planning would adequately prepare us for the unknown we were preparing to venture into. I leaned my chin against the top of Bella's head and closed my eyes, selfishly relishing in the warmth that would soon disappear. There was nothing more I could do but wait, and the passage of time seemed to tick by at an agonizingly slow pace, yet flew by much too quickly. We were at the mercy of the creature growing within my love, and there was nothing we could do. Or nothing we would be allowed to do. My own impotence continued to eat away at me. The evening gave way to morning as the sunlight gradually climbed over the mountains, bathing everything in its amber glow. Carlisle had returned to his study, continuing what seemed to be fruitless research. The rest of my siblings, with the exception of Rosalie, busied themselves as best they could. Emmett aided Carlisle with his research. Jasper had taken a break from their searching to console Alice, who was increasingly agitated by her incapacity to see Bella's future. Esme hummed quietly to herself as she prepared breakfast in anticipation of Bella's waking. I gently ran my finger across the length of Bella's arm, tracing humanly indiscernible patterns on the surface of her skin. A delicate shudder rippled through her, and I lifted my hand seconds before she sucked in a desperate gasp of air. Her eyes flew open and she clutched her belly, biting down on her lip so hard that it turned white from lack of blood flow. Bella, what is it? I asked. Bella. My eyes hurriedly scanned her body for injury, for evidence of trauma, but none was visible, save for ever-present patchwork of bruises along her abdomen. Any damage at this stage would likely be internal. She squeezed her eyes shut, her chin pressed to her chest as she struggled to cope with the pain. Then, without warning, crack. Her lips parted and a scream echoed through the house. Carlisle! I yelled, panic surging through me. Carlisle! Carlisle appeared, immediately beginning assessment of Bella's state. An internal trauma, another break. I heard a crack, Carlisle. I didn't hear a thing, countered Rosalie. I spun around, staring at my sister. If I say I heard a crack, I heard a crack. I seethed. Hearing things now, you're starting to lose it. Ignoring Rosalie, I scooped Bella up in my arms and bounded up the stairs to Carlisle's study. Alice flattened herself against the wall as we breezed by her. I laid Bella gently on the examination table as Carlisle readied the X-ray machine. She seemed to be breathing easier, but her teeth were still clenched as though she were trying to keep from crying out. Carlisle stepped beside the table and gingerly pressed along Bella's ribcage and abdomen, testing for the site of the break. She winced as his fingers moved along her already fractured ribs, but her face went pale when he reached her lower abdomen. It could be her pelvis, Carlisle murmured. We'll need the X-ray to be sure. It wasn't a break, Rosalie insisted from across the room. I didn't even bother to look at her, instead maintaining my watchful eye on Bella. That's enough, Rosalie, Carlisle reprimanded. The machine whirred to life and Carlisle positioned it over her lower abdomen, preparing to take the images that would determine if indeed her pelvis was broken. And if it was, what then? Would she finally allow us to induce labor? Would she wait until it crushed her spine? The scenarios flew through my mind and I had to release Bella's hand for fear of crushing it. The images glowed on the monitor and I watched Carlyle's mind as he examined them. There doesn't appear to be a fracture. The fetus could have been pressing on a kidney or putting pressure on the pelvic bone without actually causing breakage. Are you sure? I asked. With certainty. He nodded, patting my shoulder reassuringly. I don't see any breaks. See, I told you I didn't hear a crack, Rosalie scoffed. You need your ears checked, Edward. Carlyle looked warily between, and the two of us and Emmett appeared in the door, clearly prepared for a physical confrontation. Esme breezed past him with a cup in hand. Here you go, sweetheart, she soothed, handing the cup to Bella. Thank you, Bella smiled, taking a long sip of the red liquid and sighing with relief. It's almost gone, Esme thought, looking at both me and Carlyle. We need to go today. I could hear Jacob's thoughts from the floor below. I prayed that he had come with good news. Take me back down, Bella asked. I wanted to protest, but had little strength left to argue and if staying away from the life-saving equipment made her feel better. Then who was I to deny her? I carefully lifted Bella up in my arms and began carrying her back downstairs, brushing past Rosalie in my exit from the room. Jacob stood with Alice at the base of the stairs. Their eyes met mine as we began to descend. Jake, Bella whispered. I gently placed her on the couch and sunk down to the floor beside her. Rosalie filed in behind me, sitting a safe distance away. Carlyle, we went halfway to Seattle, Jacob began. There's no sign of the pack. You're good to go. Thank you, Jacob. This is good timing. There's much that we need. Both for Bella and ourselves. Jacob nodded. Honestly, I think you're safe to take more than 3. I'm pretty positive that Sam is concentrating on La Push. If you think so, Carlyle agreed. Alice, Esme, Jasper. And I will go. Then Alice can take Emmett and Rosa. Not a chance, Rosalie cut him off. Emmett can go with you now. You should hunt, Carlyle encouraged. I'll hunt when he does, she hissed, jutting her chin in my direction. Hearing the word hunt, both Emmett and Jasper appeared, eager to have the opportunity to sate their thirst. They flew to the back door where they were joined by Alice and Esme. Thank you, Carlyle said, placing his hand on Jacob's arm. I was surprised when Jacob didn't flinch. Then Carlyle disappeared, following the others for the hunt. It wasn't lost on me that now would be the perfect opportunity to make a move. Rosalie had no Emmett to protect her now. Jacob and I could easily subdue her, but Bella would never forgive me if I did. Jacob walked across the room, stretching out in the chair between Bella and Rosalie. Ew, Rosalie complained. Someone put the dog out. Jacob chuckled to himself. Have you heard this one, psycho? How do a blonde's brain cells die? Well, he prodded when she didn't answer. Do you know the punchline or not? She still refused to respond. Has she heard it? He asked me. No, I mumbled. I would have heard the answer in her mind if she had. Awesome. So you'll enjoy this. Bloodsucker, a blonde's brain cells die alone. There was silence for several beats before Rosalie opened her mouth. I have killed 100 times more often than you have, you disgusting beast. Don't forget that. Jacob chuckled. Someday, beauty queen, you're going to get tired of just threatening me. I'm really looking forward to that. Enough, Jacob, Bella interjected. Guess yesterday's good mood is long gone. You want me to take off? He offered. No, of course not. As much as I appreciated everything Jacob had done for us, the old embers of competition still smoldered within me. No matter what we did or how we lived our lives, it was apparent that Bella would never be willing to let him go. I wondered if she understood how unfair that was, both to me and more so to him. You look tired, she observed. Dead beat, Jacob grumbled. I'd like to beat you dead, Rosalie muttered under her breath. Uncomfortable silence enveloped the room until it was replaced by the loud suctioning as Bella emptied her cup. Rosalie, she asked, would you mind? Before Bella could finish her sentence, Allie had taken the empty cup and disappeared up the stairs for another. Might as well take a nap, Jacob thought. The room fell into silence once more. I could hear the sound of liquid being poured on the floor above me. The sound of 2 beating hearts and 2 sets of lungs and... Did you say something? I asked, turning to Bella. She stared back at me with a curious expression. Was it possible? Had I heard her? It was unlike the thoughts of the others that are a string of words and emotions. This was more like the impression I felt when Jasper projected his ability, saturating the room with emotion. But Jasper was gone. Me? Bella asked. I didn't say anything, but there it was again, the undeniable feeling of contentment emanating from Bella. Had something changed? How was it that I could now hear her? But hear merely her feelings and not her thoughts? I leaned up, staring at her face, trying to connect the feelings I could sense and the expression in her eyes. What are you thinking about right now? She stared at me for several seconds. Nothing. What's going on? What were you thinking about a minute ago? Just Esme's island. And feathers. She blushed. The sensation was still there. But the feelings I was sensing didn't seem to connect to Bella's emotional state. I should hear confusion, embarrassment, but all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of contentment. Could it be? Say something else, I whispered, leaning closer to Bella's swollen abdomen. Like what? Edward, what's going on? Contentment, affection, happiness. Could it be the fetus that I was hearing? The thoughts were not formed like those I had become accustomed to. They were emotions rather than words. And the emotions seemed to grow stronger with the sound of Bella's voice. Was it possible that I had been wrong all along about the thing growing inside of her? My hands quivered as I reached out, gently placing them on her abdomen. Her eyes widened at the gesture and I could hear Jacob's surprised thoughts as well. Amazing. I stopped myself. This wasn't merely a creature, wasn't merely a fetus. The being inside of her had feelings and emotions far superior to what I would expect. From the demon I believed to be growing inside of her. The baby likes the sound of your voice, I whispered. Holy crow, you can hear him. Bella shouted. The feelings of contentment quickly to frighten Bella winced as the baby jostled within her. I moved my hand, rubbing her belly in slow circles. Shish, I whispered. You startled at him. Her eyes widened and I could see the shock in her expression at this new revelation. Sorry, baby, she soothed. I tilted my head toward her belly, leaning my ear closer. I tried to recall if I had ever heard this tenor of thought before, but had ignored it. I never imagined that I could hear the thoughts of the thing growing within her, but even more than that, I never dreamed that the thoughts would be like this. Blood, death, destruction, that was its mantra. Or so I thought, but no love, contentment, adoration. If I wasn't hearing it for myself, I never would have believed it. What's he thinking now? Bella asked. He or she, he's happy. Tears welled in Bella's eyes and tricked down her cheeks as she smiled at me. I couldn't believe it. How had I been so wrong? I thought that it was a demon, a monster, but the more I could hear of its thoughts, the more I came to understand that it was a being like us with feelings and emotions capable of so much more than mere devastation. Of course you're happy, pretty baby, of course you are, she crooned. How could you not be, all safe and warm and loved? I love you so much, little EJ, of course you're happy. What did you call him? I asked. Her cheeks stained crimson. I sort of named him. I didn't think you would want well, you know. She was right. I had been so bent on destroying the abomination that I never conceived of caring for it, let alone naming it. EJ, your father's name was Edward, too. She explained. Yes, it was. I nodded. The thoughts emanating from her belly altered and I found myself startled. What? He likes my voice, too. Of course he does. She beamed. You have the most beautiful voice in the universe. Who wouldn't love it? Do you have a backup plan? Rosalie interjected. What if he's a she? I kicked a few things around. Playing with Renee and Esme. I was thinking Run-Esme. Rune-Esme. Rin-Esme. Too weird. Rosalie shook her head. No, I like it. It's beautiful. And one of a kind, so that fits. I still think he's an Edward. Bella smiled, rubbing my hand that still rested on her belly. As Bella spoke, I could feel the emotion emanating from her belly swell until it was an overwhelming and undeniable sense of adoration and love. The thing inside her, the baby, loved her. And, for whatever reason unknown to me, it recognized my voice and felt an attachment to me as well. I could feel the ice that had built up around my heart begin to melt away. The fear of the unknown began to disappear and, for the first time, I felt myself become eager to meet the child growing inside her. Realization dawned on me that what we had done on Isle Esme, the death I was so sure I had doomed her to, was nothing like what I had thought. We had done the impossible. Bella and I had created a life out of love. And that made me something I never, in my 100 years, thought I could be, a father. What? Bella asked, breaking my concentration. What's he thinking now? I couldn't help myself. I felt the need to be as close as possible, to feel even a fraction of what Bella had felt, to attain the connection she had from the moment we discovered this miracle. I pressed my ear to her belly, feeling the warmth of her skin against my cheek and sensing the movements within. He loves you, I whispered, still amazed by this discovery. He absolutely adores you. I heard Bella gasp before she laid her hand against my head. I had been so wrong, so absolutely wrong. Something that could love Bella as unconditionally as this child does, whose love could only rival my own. How could something capable of such emotion be evil? For all the time I spent hating myself and hating him, I couldn't conceive of harming him now. He was a part of me, a part of Bella. A miracle. A sudden movement the corner of my eye broke my focus and I turned to see Jacob standing just feet away, his cells quivering with the urge to phase. His mind was a tortured mess of confusion and pain, unable to cope with this new discovery. With the thought that he was losing his only ally in the effort to save Bella. He fought to hide his grimace as his eyes flickered between Bella, myself, and the door. More than the urge to protect my family, I felt the responsibility of relieving Jacob from his duties here, of allowing him to escape what was so clearly painful for him to witness. I moved across the room to the end table and opened it. Grabbing the first keys that caught my eye, I tossed the keys to the vanquished to Jacob and he caught them easily. Go, Jacob, get away from here. He hesitated for a moment, and then stared at the keys in his hand. Several beats passed before he seemed to make the connection in his mind. Then, before another second had passed, he disappeared from the room. Where did he? Bella began. I knelt down beside her again, laying one hand on her stomach and reaching up with the other to tuck a lock of hair behind her ear. He needed to get away, I whispered. He'll be back. He just needed some time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. You didn't do anything wrong. It's my fault that I love you both, that I need you both in my life. It's just not fair to you or to him. And we both choose to be here because we care about you. That's the only thing that matters. She tugged her bottom lip between her teeth and nodded, placing her hand over mine. I lowered my gaze to our hands. With the need to be concerned over Jacob's feelings temporarily relieved, I once again found myself in awe of our discovery. I was fascinated by the baby's stream of thought, his ability to emotionally respond to the external stimulus. Even now, he seemed curious about Jacob's departure, hearing the tension in my voice and Bella's. I found myself questioning his capabilities. Whether his hearing would be as acute as mine. My mind began working at a rapid pace, thinking through our conversation with Carlisle on genetics. Until the moment I heard the child's thoughts, couldn't bring myself to believe it could be anything other than a monster, but now everything I held true was being brought into question. This child wasn't just a part of me, it was a part of Bella as well. I began to ponder the traits he might possess, whether he would appear human or vampire, or perhaps a mixture of the two. Never believing that our two species could produce viable offspring, I never imagined what the joining of our two genetic lines would create. Based on the thoughts emanating from the womb, even at this stage, he seemed to be functioning at a higher cognitive level than most human offspring of his age. Already capable of understanding an emotion such as love. This child was clearly and understandably unique. The sound of thumping paws broke my train of thought. I turned my head to see Leah trotting toward the house. I'll just be a moment, I said, lifting Bella's hand to my lips before turning toward the door. Leah stood at the bottom of the stairs, her nose wrinkled against the unpleasant odor. What happened? Where did Jacob go? He just needed some time to himself, to sort out his thoughts, I explained. Sort out his thoughts? About what? We discovered that I can hear the baby's thoughts. It's unlike anything I've heard before and nothing like what I expected. It changes everything. I don't think Jacob was prepared for this possibility. The hackles rose along her back. Prepared for what possibility? The possibility that everything will work out better than we could have imagined. That what is growing inside Bella is not a monster, but a baby already capable of love. With this new understanding of the baby's cognitive abilities, it's probable that we may be able to communicate at least on some level. He clearly loves Bella and, I would wager, wouldn't want to hurt her. I paused, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Until the moment I heard his thoughts, I never dreamed it would be possible that she could deliver safely, that we could be a family. Family, and where does that leave Jacob? Same place he always is, outside looking in. Leah, she's my wife and Jacob's friend. Surely, he understands. That's it, she huffed. Leah's body began to shiver and shrink until, only moments later, she was standing in her human form. She scowled as she started toward the house, her eyes burning with determination. The rapid change was shocking and so utterly out of character that I didn't move to stop her as she strolled past me and into the house. I quickly followed behind, passing her to stand by Bella. Who do you think you are? She demanded, her fists clenched as she stared at Bella. Wah, Bella stammered. Is this fun for you? Treating Jacob the way you do? Do you enjoy seeing him in pain? She sneered. Of course not, Bella insisted, clearly thrown off guard by Leah's accusations. Rosalie moved beside Bella in a protective stance. Back off, dog. Could have fooled me. I'll never understand it, but Jacob loves you. He loves you more than life itself. And how do you repay him? You throw it in his face. She seethed. He's been nothing but good to you, done nothing but do everything in his power to keep you safe, keep you alive. He left his pack for you. He would have done anything for you. Why do you keep putting him through this? Bella's mouth gaped as she stared at Leah, her eyes flickering briefly to me. But I don't want to hear your excuses, Leah cut her off, throwing her hand in the air. Why can't you just let him go? Can't you see that all you're doing is hurting him? He can't be your friend, Bella. You haven't been friends since this bloodsucker left you in the woods, she spat, angrily pointing her finger at me. Leah, I warned, taking a step closer. All he ever did was love you, she continued, ignoring me. And you couldn't even be bothered to care. I do care, Bella insisted, her bottom lip beginning to tremble. I love Jacob. He's my best friend. Leah shook her head, crossing her arms. You sure have a funny way of showing it. Don't you have somewhere to be? Rosalie growled, edging closer to Leah. Leah glared at her, but maintained her stance. The thoughts in her mind were raging, anger engulfing her every molecule. This was more than her being protective of Jacob, she was identifying with him. Something about the relationship we all shared struck a chord. That reminded her all too well of the way Sam had left her, of the way she was forced to endure hearing and witnessing his feelings for her cousin with no chance of escape. All those pent-up feelings were boiling over, and Bella was receiving the brunt of her rage and resentment. You know, you've always been so willing to die for these leeches, maybe Jake should have just let you, she sneered, her lip curling in unnatural satisfaction as she released the words she had never dared to say aloud before. Leah, that's enough, I reached out, gripping her by the elbow and turning for the door. She jerked her arm away, narrowing her eyes at me. Don't touch me, she seethed. I'm sorry, Bella choked as tears began to fall. I stood, quaking with anger, one hand clenched tightly in a fist and the other pointed at the door. You need to go, I growled. Now, what's going on? Seth asked as he jogged through the door. His eyes quickly surveyed the scene and it was easily apparent what had transpired. Oh no, Leah, let's go. Leah was continuing to stare me down and it took every ounce of restraint not to launch myself at her. Rosalie moved beside me, creating a protective wall between the wolves and Bella. Out, Rosalie hissed. I was only speaking the truth, Leah replied, as though the effect her words had on Bella were of no consequence. Out now, I repeated, or I will put you out. Leah, come on. Seth tugged on his sister's arm and she relented after a brief struggle. Jake can speak for himself. He doesn't need you to speak for him. Seth gave his sister's arm another HR tug toward the door and she quickly whipped past him, running from the house. I'm sorry, Seth mouthed as he ran after her. I stared at the open doorway for a moment, still shocked by Leah's outburst. I turned and knelt beside Bella. The tears were flowing freely now as she covered her face with her hands. Rosalie stood behind her, rubbing her shoulders to soothe her as best she could. Bella, please don't cry, I pleaded. Leah's words mean nothing, she's just upset. Bella glared at me with narrowed, red-rimmed eyes. But she was right, she choked. No, she wasn't. She's letting her feelings for Sam cloud the issue. Jacob chose to be here with you because he's your friend. He's strong and he understands you've already shed your tears for him. Bella shook her head vehemently and crossed her arms over her knees, burying her face further. I looked helplessly at Rose, who merely shrugged her shoulders. It seemed neither of us was equipped to undo the damage that Leah's accusations had inflicted. I eased myself onto the couch beside Bella and reached my arms around her, pulling her into my lap, cradling her against me. Her body shuddered with her continued sobs and I did what I could. I held her. I held tightly onto her while she cried, each tear slicing through my heart as I was forced to witness her pain. I had only seen her cry like this on a couple of occasions, and each time, my heart broke for her. Her guilt for Jacob was a crushing burden she already carried, only made worse by Leah's tirade. Can I get you anything? Rosalie asked softly. Bella shook her head, still keeping it buried in her arms. Her sobs had quieted, but I could still feel the moisture of her tears as they trickled down her cheeks, falling onto my arms that held her tight. As I comforted her, I listened to the concerned thoughts of our child. He could sense her distress and it seemed to bother him greatly. Ah, Bella gasped, unwinding her arms to clutch her midsection. Bella, she blew out several slow breaths before raising her hand and shaking her head. I'm fine, she wheezed. I'm fine. It was then that I had an idea. Bella, may I asked, gesturing to her swollen belly. He looked at me with a puzzled expression, but nodded her assent. I knelt down until I was at eye level with her stomach. I placed my hands on either side of her belly and stroked it gently. Where did it hurt? I asked her. She pointed to her right side. I rubbed small circles in the place she had pointed to. Baby, can you hear me? I spoke softly. Bella looked quizzically at me, but smiled. Baby, I could hear the recognition in the child's thoughts. He knew my voice. I stroked the place where the pain had originated from, pressing lightly. Can you feel my hand? I asked. Bella winced ghtly. At the same moment I felt a delicate pressure against my palm. You can. That's good. With my other hand on the opposite side, I pressed in again and asked, can you feel my hand over here? Again, the slightest pressure pressed against my palm and I smiled at the sensation. He can understand me, I beamed. Bella's mouth popped open. Are you sure? It's astounding, but yes, I believe he can. I felt a sharper movement against my palm and Bella cried out. Shish, baby shish, I soothed, rubbing the spot where he had kicked. You love your mother, don't you? I asked. The overwhelming sense of devotion emanated from her belly. And you don't want to harm her, do you? I asked. The response was absolute agreement. He understood love as well as pain. You're very strong and it hurts her when you kick. Can you try to be still? Quote, the emotion of love was now tinged with remorse. It appeared that he had the mental capacity to understand that his actions were causing pain, something he did. And he wished to do to someone he cared so much for. He understands, I breathed, smiling up at Bella. He understands. This changes everything. Bella gazed at me, not seeming to understand. He doesn't want to hurt you, I explained. And he can understand me. If we can explain to him what hurts you, he can try to avoid it. If we can communicate on this level, we can conceivably talk him through the entire delivery process. We can save you both. Bella's eyes widened as she processed this new revelation. She placed her hand atop mine. Together we cradled the unexpected marvel she carried in her womb. I continued to listen to the thoughts of our child, finding myself increasingly enamored with its amazing intellect. I had never before attempted to listen to the thoughts of an unborn human child. But I had heard the minds of infants before and none could compare to the advanced understanding that ours was exhibiting. His mind was a complex tapestry of evolving emotion and understanding. It was amazing what he was able to glean solely by listening. I wagered that his hearing must be akin to mine if he could hear our voices so clearly through the barriers that contained him. As I listened, I began to hear an edge of concern and discomfort tinging his thoughts, a desire to move and to stretch, hindered by a fear that he might harm Bella. I don't think we should wait, I whispered. Bella looked up. Wait for what, Edward? No, Rosalie thought, already understanding my meaning. I think we should ask Carlyle to deliver the baby when he returns, I answered. Bella bit down on her lip and glanced over at Rosalie, who shook her head imperceptibly. Why? I can hear his fear, his discomfort. He's afraid to hurt you, but there isn't adequate space in the womb for him. He's unable to stretch and move as he normally would because he now knows that it would cause you harm. I don't know. Rosalie pursed her lips. Will it be safe? Bella is only a couple of days shy of a full-term pregnancy. At least as far as we can tell, I replied. I wouldn't foresee any complications from delivering a day or two early. I'm not sure, Bella whispered. I think it's dangerous to continue to wait for both you and the baby. Bella and Rosalie exchanged a loaded glance. Call Carlyle, Rosalie finally answered. See what he has to say. If he agrees, then so will we. I spent the next several moments pacing the floor of Carlyle's office, explaining our discovery and my hope that he would deliver the baby upon his return. His reluctance was only surpassed by his amazement. He asked Ed what seemed like an endless series of questions regarding the baby's temperament, thought processes, and comprehension. He did agree that the ability to communicate, at least on a rudimentary level, would be immensely helpful during the delivery. Carlyle had sent Jasper and Alice back with a load of supplies, but had decided to seek out another source to sustain Bella's new diet. I tried to convince him that more blood wouldn't be necessary if we were to induce her labor, but he insisted that there may be need for a transfusion and, if the baby was craving blood while in the womb, it was likely it would harbor the same proclivity after it was born. With much trepidation, I agreed that a greater blood supply would be prudent and he promised to return by the following day. I hung up the phone, feeling marginally better about the situation, but seeing the pain Bella was in and hearing the discomfort of our child made me anxious to elevate the timeline. Waiting out the next 18 hours or so until Carlisle's return would be agonizing. With my medical degree, it was probable that I could go ahead with the procedure, but my lack of practical application would likely cause both Rosalie and Bella to refuse. The sound of voices filtered up the stairway and I returned to see Alice and Jasper speaking quietly with Rosalie. I sat beside Bella, who was now curled under a quilt, snoring softly. Her cheeks were still red and streaked with the tears she had shed just moments ago. Jasper regarded me with amusement as he sampled my temperament, enamored by my drastic emotional shift. For the first time in weeks, he could sense hope. Rosalie was relaying our discovery and the possibilities it presented. Alice was visibly relieved and Jasper, also relieved, seemed more so to be delayed to finally have an answer to the question that had been nagging at the back of his mind. He has sensed the child's emotions, though because I had not indicated any ability to hear its thoughts and Carlisle's ultrasound had failed. He believed it would be impossible for his ability to breach the protective barrier within the womb. He had dismissed the emotions he sensed, assuming they were being produced by someone else. Or even from Bella herself. Although pleased to hear the good news, without the presence of a wolf in the house, the distortion in Alice's vision quickly returned, forcing her to relegate herself elsewhere in the house. And, once again, Rosalie and I were left alone to watch over Bella. As we sat in silence, I listened to the thoughts of the wolves outside. Seth was upset with his sister for the way she had acted, yet understanding of her pain. Leah seemed to have found a sense of liberation through her words, though her thoughts were now tinged with an inkling of remorse. Extending my ability outward, I could hear the thoughts of the other wolves, of Sam's pack, as they sat guard at the border of our territory. Hearing the fear and anger in their minds gave me great concern. Although the likelihood that both Bella and the baby would survive the delivery was improving, there was still the distinct possibility that something could go wrong. The treaty, now severely strained and likely broken, would surely be shattered the moment Bella's heart stopped beating. Treaty or no treaty, I would do whatever I had to do to keep Bella alive, in one form or the other. But the stress of the new dynamic would be made exponentially worse if we were forced to run from the wolves. If a new treaty could be forged, if a new agreement could be made, we could focus our efforts on helping Bella adapt to a new life and on adapting our own lives to care for an infant with yet unknown characteristics. I made a mental note to discuss this with Jacob upon his return. Not only was he now an alpha with a pack of his own, but he was the descendant of Ephraim Black, the true alpha of Sam's pack. His authority by birth should outweigh Sam's assumed power. No sooner had I made this decision than I heard the roar of the vanquish as it approached the house. With Bella still sleeping soundly, I made my way to the garage to greet him. I also had wished to discuss Leah's actions in his absence and, with the possibility of raised voices, I didn't want to take the chance of waking Bella. A flicker of surprise registered on Jacob's face as he pulled the car to a stop in the garage. His thoughts, though calmed a bit, were still tinged with bitterness. "A few things, Jacob," I began. He closed his eyes briefly and held his breath before rising from the car and tossing the keys to me. "Thanks for the loan," he grumbled. "What do you want now? Firstly, I know how averse you are to using your authority with your pack, but..." "What?" he asked, confused by my words. I could feel my ire rising again. Bella's emotional wounds still too new for me to remain calm. "If you can't or won't control Leah, then I..." "Leah," he interrupted. "What happened? She came up to see why you'd left so abruptly." I tried to explain. "I suppose it might not have come out right." Jacob sucked in a breath through his teeth. "What did she do?" "She phased to her human form and..." "Really?" he interjected. "She let her guard down in the mouth of the enemy's lair." "She wanted to speak to Bella." "To Bella," he repeated. I clenched my fists at my sides, reining in my temper. "I won't let Bella be upset like that again. I don't care how justified Leah thinks she is. I didn't hurt her, of course I wouldn't, but I'll throw her out of the house if it happens again. I'll launch her right across the river." "Hold on." Jacob shook his head, waving his hands in the air to stop me. "What did she say?" Leah was unnecessarily harsh. "I'm not going to pretend that I understand why Bella is unable to let go of you. But I do know that she does not behave this way to hurt you. She suffers a great deal over the pain she's inflicting on you, and on me, by asking you to stay." What Leah said was uncalled for. "Bella's been crying. Wait, Leah was yelling at Bella about me. I nodded. You were quite vehemently championed. Whoa, I didn't ask her to do that. I know. Who would have believed it? I can't promise to control Leah. I won't do that, but I'll talk to her, okay? And I don't think there'll be a repeat. Leah's not one to hold back, so she probably got it all off her chest today. I would say so, I scoffed. Anyway, I'll talk to Bella about it, too. She doesn't need to feel bad. This one's on me. I already told her that. Of course you did. He rolled his eyes brief. Lee before his expression morphed to one of concern. Is she okay? She's sleeping now. Rose is with her. Rosé, he's completely crossed over to the dark side. She's better in some ways, I continued. Aside from Leah's tirade and the resulting guilt. Better. Because he can hear the monster and everything and it's all lovey-dovey now. Fantastic. It's a bit more than that, I explained. Now that I can make out the child's thoughts. It's apparent that he or she has remarkably developed mental facilities. He can understand us, to an extent. His jaw went slack. Are you serious? Yes. I nodded. He seems to have a vague sense of what hurts her now. He's trying to avoid that, as much as possible. He loves her. Already. I waited a moment as I allowed the new information to sink in. Almost immediately, he seemed to understand how important this discovery was, how it changed the entire dynamic of our situation, although it still didn't dispel his fears about the harm that could still befall Bella. The progress, I believe, is more than we'd judged, I continued. When Carlisle returns, they're not back, he asked, cutting me off, his thoughts turning to the wolves bordering the perimeter and the threat they could cause. Alice and Jasper are. Carlisle sent all the blood he was able to acquire, but it wasn't as much as he was hoping for. Bella will use up this supply in another day the way her appetite has grown. Carlisle stayed to try another source. I don't think that's necessary now, but he wants to be covered for any eventuality. Why isn't it necessary? If she needs more, I'm trying to persuade Carlisle to deliver the baby as soon as he is back. What? Jacob gasped. The child seems to be attempting to avoid rough movements, but it's difficult. He's become too big. It's madness to wait, when he's clearly developed beyond what Carlisle had guessed. Bella's too fragile to delay. Jacob pressed his hand to his chest, as though the wind had been knocked from his lungs. His surprise rapidly turned to despair as he realized our timeline had been drastically cut short. He stared at me with unblinking eyes before his mind began working again. You think she's going to make it, he whispered. A prayer more than an observation. Yes, I nodded. That was the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. Jacob stared, dumbfounded. Yes, I continued, waiting, as we have been. For the child to be ready, that was insanely dangerous. At any moment it could have been too late. But if we're proactive about this, if we act quickly, I see no reason why it should not go well. Knowing the child's mind is unbelievably helpful. Thankfully, Bella and Rose agree with me. Now that I've convinced them it's safe for the child if we proceed, there's nothing to keep this from working. When will Carlisle be back? He asked. By noon tomorrow. Jacob reached out to steady himself as his knees gave way. I started to reach for him, but stopped myself, knowing he would disdain my touch more than he would appreciate my assistance. The sorrow rolled off of him in waves and I felt immensely guilty for the anguish I had inflicted on him. I'm sorry, I whispered. I am truly sorry for the pain this causes you, Jacob. Though you hate me, I must admit that I don't feel the same about you. I think of you as a brother in many ways. A comrade in arms, at the very least. I regret your suffering more than you realize. But Bella is going to survive and I know that's what really matters to you. I could sense his agreement, although he was still in a state of shock. So I hate to do this now. I continued, while you're already dealing with too much, but, clearly, there is little time. I have to ask you for something to beg, if I must. He looked up at me with pained eyes. I don't have anything left, he choked. His pain pierced through me, reminding me of a time not long ago when I believed I had lost everything, when the weight of it all was so heavy that it crushed me completely. I longed to comfort him, but held back. I know how much you have given, I whispered. But this is something you do have, and only you. I'm asking this of the true Alpha, Jacob. I'm asking this of Ephraim's heir. I continued when he failed to respond. I want your permission to deviate from what we agreed to in our treaty with Ephraim. I want you to grant us an exception. I want your permission to save her life. You know I'll do it anyway, but I don't want to break faith with you if there is any way to avoid it. We never intended to go back on our word, and we don't do it lightly now. I want your understanding, Jacob, because you know exactly why we do this. I want the alliance between our families to survive when this is over. It's Sam you want. No, I shook my head. Sam's authority is assumed. It belongs to you. You'll never take it from him, but no one can rightfully agree to what I'm asking except for you. It's not my decision. It is, Jacob, and you know it. Only you can give this to me. I can't think. I don't know. We don't have much time, I pleaded. I don't know. Let me think. Just give me a minute here, okay? Yes, I agreed to Jacob's unspoken words. He started toward the house and I followed, listening to the broken train of thought as he tried to piece his sanity back together, to make sense of everything that had transpired and what it would mean for everyone. Seth trotted over to us, his thoughts apprehensive and concerned. Hey, kid, Jacob muttered, seeming to find his voice again. He reached over and patted Seth on the shoulder. "S'all cool, I'll tell you about it later. Sorry to take off on you like that. I understand." Seth grinned. "Hey, tell your sister to back off now, okay? Enough." Seth nodded. "Will do. Get back to work. I'll spell you in a bit." Quote. Seth trotted back to the tree line, leaving us alone again. "He has one of the purest, sincerest, kindest minds I've ever heard," I offered. "You're lucky to have his thoughts to share." "I know that." The sound of liquid being sucked through a straw caught our attention and I bolted up to the house. Bella was sitting up on the couch, the quilt still wrapped around her. Her fingers gripping a styrofoam cup. "Bella, love, I thought you were sleeping," I breathed. "I'm sorry, I wouldn't have left." She shook her head. "Don't worry, I just got so thirsty it woke me up. It's a good thing Carlisle is bringing more. This kid is going to need it when he gets out of me." "True," I nodded. "That's a good point. I wonder if he'll want anything else," she pondered aloud. "I suppose we'll find out." Jacob walked in behind me. Finally, Alice sighed with relief. Bella looked up, her eyes locking with Jacob's. She smiled, but it quickly faltered as she remembered Leah's words. "Hey, Bells," Jacob greeted, effectively hiding his sadness. "How ya doing?" "I'm fine," she said. "Big day today, huh? Lots of new stuff." She pursed her lips. "You don't have to do that, Jacob." He shrugged. "Don't know what you're talking about." He moved toward her, sitting on the arm of the sofa. "I'm so s." He reached over, gently pinching her lips closed. "Jake," she mumbled, trying to pull his hand away. He shook his head. "You can talk when you're not being stupid." "Fine, I won't say it," she grumbled. He lowered his hand. "Sorry," she blurted out, smiling widely. He rolled his eyes, but returned the smile. He maintained a carefree facade, but his mind was reeling as the reality of the coming changes began to sink in. As his mind worked through everything, I could see a subtle shift, the disdain he held for our kind diminishing somewhat when he thought of what it would mean for his love for and friendship with Bella. As much as he wanted to hate us, he was finding it increasingly improbably that he could have any feeling for her other than love, regardless of whether her heart continued to beat or not. He breathed a heavy sigh. "Fine, go ahead, save her. As Ephraim's heir, you have my permission, my word, that this will not violate the treaty. The others will just have to blame me. You were right, they can't deny that it's my right to agree to this." "Thank you," I whispered quietly, unable to keep the emotion from seeping into my voice. I could feel Alice and Rosalie's eyes on me, their thoughts puzzled. "So," Bella began, breaking our silent conversation. "How was your day?" "Great," Jacob shrugged. "Went for a drive, hung out in the park." "Sounds nice," she hummed. Sure. Bella scrunched her face, displaying some level of discomfort. "Rose?" she asked. "Bathroom." Again, Rosalie laughed. Bella smiled meekly. "I think I've drunk 2 gallons in the last hour," she explained. Jacob and I both moved out of the way as Rosalie moved to lift Bella from the couch. "Can I walk?" Bella complained. "My legs are so stiff." "Are you sure?" I asked, uncertain she would be steady on her feet. "Rose'll catch me if I trip over my feet." "Which could happen pretty easily. Since I can't see them." Rosalie hesitated briefly, but set Bella carefully on her feet and held onto her shoulders to steady her. Bella stretched out her arms, rolling her shoulders. "That feels good," she sighed. But I'm huge one more day." I exchanged a look with Jacob as I saw the pain of her words ripple briefly across his expression before he quickly squelched it. "Alrighty, then," Bella breathed. "Whoopso." "No." I watched helplessly as Bella's cup fell over, saturating the couch cushion and carpet in thick, red liquid. I instinctually held my breath, knowing that the overwhelming aroma of freshly spilled blood would be too much for me when I had gone so long without. Bella began to bend down to pick up the cup, but Alice, Rosalie, and I were already reaching for it. That's when I heard it, the sound that would send my entire world into a tailspin. "Oh," Bella gasped. I watched in horror as her body fell limp and plummeted to the floor. Rosalie was closer and caught her before I could. "Bella," I asked, reaching for her, trying to keep the panic from my voice. She was unresponsive, but the sounds of distress emanating from within her ripped through me. The quiet was shattered by a shriek of agonizing pain. Bella's body shuddered, twisting at an unnatural angle. The sounds of tearing filled my ears and I watched helplessly as Bella's scream was drowned by a gush of blood. The world, already tilting on its axis, was awash in a brilliant crimson hue. The gore was only surpassed by the blinding terror that seized every mind. In the room, every mind except for Bella's. Her body wrenched itself in a grotesquely unnatural manner, spasms rippling outward from her midsection. The shocking display was made even more horrific by her utter lack of response. The slow burn in my throat burst into flames as the scent of freshly spilled blood filled my nostrils. I steeled my resolve and forced my airway to close, but the damage was done as the sweet scent lingered in my lungs, stoking the flames that scorched their way up my throat. Sharp cracks reverberated through Bella's body as our child, stricken by some yet unknown ailment, panicked. All thought and emotion overridden by the instinct to survive. All thoughts lingering on my own hunger evaporated. "Something's wrong. The baby's in distress," Rosalie thought as she hoisted Bella up in her arms and bolted for the stairs. "We need to get her to Carlisle's study," she shouted. "Something's wrong. I can hear him. He's in distress," I gasped as I followed her up the stairs. "He's panicking. We can't wait for Carlisle. We'll have to do it. There's no time." I shattered the switch in my haste to turn on the lights as Rosalie laid Bella on the table and began gathering the instruments. "Morphine," I shouted. "Alice, get Carlisle on the phone." Rosalie yelled. "Carlisle, phone right." A flustered Alice disappeared from the room just as Jacob appeared in the door, helpless and frightened. Ignoring my plea for morphine, Rosalie did her best to hold Bella down as she convulsed. The sound of shredding of fabric filled the room as Rosalie hastily ripped Bella's clothing away. I grabbed the syringe of morphine from the tray of instruments and, ignoring standard protocol, thrust the needle into Bella's arm. If Bella were to die today, it would not be from infection. "What's happening, Edward?" Jacob asked from across the room. "I can't look. He's suffocating," I hissed. "Placental abruption. The placenta must have detached," Rosalie added. I turned to gather the instruments, making sure the syringe filled with my venom was within reach, when Bella's voice rang in my ears. "Get him out," she screamed. I turned, locking eyes with Rosalie. "He can't breathe," Bella shrieked. "Do it now." I gaped at her for a fraction of a second, weighing the options, knowing that there had not been sufficient time for the morphine to spread through her bloodstream and take effect. I reached for her hand. "The morphine." She shook her head. "No, now." Fresh blood bubbled from her lips, choking off her words. I lifted her head up as best I could. Her upper body and lower body seemed to be working against each other, one nearly lifeless while the other thrashed uncontrollably. I reached behind me to flip a switch and began suctioning the blood from her mouth to clear her airway. She sputtered and coughed, her hand wrapped around my wrist, her nails uselessly attempting to dig into my forearm. "I've got Carlisle." Alice appeared at Rosalie's side and clipped an earpiece to her ear. "It's Bella. The baby, placental abruption, we think," Rosalie hissed into the phone, her words coming so fast, they were beginning to run together. I could hear Carlisle and the other end of the line, hear the fear in his voice, the distress that we would have to perform the delivery without him. With Carlisle in Rosalie's ear to walk her through the process of delivering the baby. The responsibility of monitoring Bella's condition was left to me. I continued to suction her mouth, though the flow had ebbed slightly. Her recent outburst was a distant memory as she struggled for breath. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the glint of light as Rosalie raised the scalpel in her hand. My free hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist. "Let the morphine spread," I shouted. "There's no time," she hissed back. "He's dying." My resolve faltered at the thought of losing them both and I loosened my grip. Rosalie wrenched her hand free and slid the scalpel across Bella's abdomen. Scarlet bloomed from the incision and flowed, hot and thick, across Bella's snowy skin. Bella winced, but was either too shocked or too focused on her struggle for breath to react further. Blood. The singular thought rippled its way through the room and nearly bowled me over with its ferocity. I looked up to see Rosalie, her dark eyes crazed with thirst as she held the scalpel in her hand. The fresh blood dripping down her fingers. I was momentarily paralyzed by the realization that she was preparing to attack Bella. I held Bella's head in my hands, afraid to let go for fear that she would drown in her own blood. I looked beseechingly at Jacob as I began to shout, "No, Rose!" Without hesitation, Jacob leapt across the table, barreling into Rosalie and knocking her to the floor. He didn't flinch as the scalpel in her hand pierced his arm. I watched in admiration and horror as Jacob wrestled Rosalie toward the door. Even more impressive was the struggle within Rosalie's mind as she fought her inner demon with every ounce of strength she possessed. I tore my eyes away as I heard Bella's heart falter. She stared up at me, unseeing. Panic seized me. Alice grabbed Rosalie by the throat and hauled her up through the doorway and into the hall. Jacob pulled the scalpel from his arm and pressed his palm against the wound. "Alice, get her out of here!" I shouted. "Take her to Jasper and keep her there. Jacob, I need you." With Rosalie incapacitated and the phone shattered in the struggle, it was left to Jacob and myself to deliver the baby and save Bella. Jacob ran to my side. "CPR. Yes." He paused, his mind searching my face for any sign that I would be tempted. With Bella dying in my arms, my thirst was the furthest thing from my mind. "Get her breathing," I ordered, as I moved from Bella's head toward the site of the incision. "I've got to get him out before." A loud crack pierced the air, followed by a deafening silence. Bella was frozen, unmoving, unresponsive. There was no cry, no scream of agony, nothing. "Her spine," I gasped, feeling all the air whoosh from my lungs. My knees grew weak and I had to grip the table for support. "Get it out of her," Jacob growled, throwing the scalpel at me. "She won't feel anything now." I nodded and reached for the scalpel. Though the flow of blood was heavy, the initial incision Rosalie had made was relatively shallow. I ran the blade across the flesh, cutting deeper through layers of tissue. I eased the incision apart, exposing the bulging uterus. Dragging the scalpel across the membrane, I could hear the tip of the blade scrape against something hard, like a stone wrapped in flesh and blood. As I worked, I listened to the sounds of the room, the faltering rhythm of Bella's heart, the sound of air being forced into her lungs at regular intervals, the sound of Jacob counting under his breath as he worked to keep her heart pumping. I could hear the voices of my siblings as they murmured quietly elsewhere in the house. I could hear Seth and Leah as they paced outside, nervously wondering what was transpiring inside. With all the sounds that filled my ears, nothing would compare to the next. With no time to waste and with Carlyle's theories fresh in my mind, I squeezed my eyes shut as I sank my teeth into the protective barrier around the baby. The screeching sounds, like tearing metal, rang in my ears as I tore through the membrane with my teeth. Carlyle had been right about the amniotic sac possessing properties much like our skin. Ignoring the hunger that burned in my belly, I ripped my way through the thick wall, taking great care not to harm the baby. "You stay with me now, Bella," I heard Jacob yell. "Do you hear me? Stay. You're not leaving me. Keep your heart beating." I forced myself to work quickly as I listened to Bella's failing heart. I continued to bite my way across the barrier, creating an opening wide enough to deliver the baby. Feeling relatively certain that I had succeeded, I leaned up, wiping the blood and gore from my mouth with my forearm, and reached into Bella's abdomen. Warm, slippery flesh met my hands as I wrapped them around the tiny, human form. I lifted my arms up and was met with a sight that could only be described as an absolute miracle. Time stopped. I stared in marvel at the creature in my hands, perfectly formed and beautiful like her mother. The tiny baby in my arms was not the boy Bella had anticipated, but a precious baby girl. A daughter. Her eyes opened, her chocolate brown eyes, and her tiny fingers reached for me. I gazed in wonder. She was not the boy her mother imagined, nor the monster I had come to expect until only days before her birth. I could feel my heart tearing in two. Bella was the love of my life, of my existence, and before meeting her, I had never imagined I could love so deeply and completely. But as I held this child in my arms, my daughter, I found myself besieged by my immediate and absolute adoration of her. "Renesmee," I whispered. From the corner of my eye, I saw Bella weakly raise her arms. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she looked at the two of us. "Let me," she whispered. "Give her to me." Gently, I laid the baby on Bella's chest. Bella reached up with a shaky hand, stroking the side of her face and staring with the same awe. "Renesmee," she whispered. "So beautiful." I smiled, at the meeting of mother and daughter, amazed that we had even succeeded thus far in such a dangerous endeavor. I found myself growing dangerously hopeful. But my smile quickly disappeared when Bella's expression changed from one of wonder to one of pain. I reached for the baby and flinched when I saw the small crescent mark blooming red on Bella's chest. No, Renesmee, I murmured, knowing that she would understand just as she had when she was still in the womb. Her lips were stained red, though it was barely distinguishable from the gore that still coated her skin. She let out a frustrated cry, revealing 2 tiny rows of perfect white teeth. Her small fingers gripped mine and she stared at me, her thoughts torn between her need for her mother and her desire to sat her hunger. The room was suddenly too quiet. I turned my head to see Jacob pressing his hands to Bella's chest, counting under his breath again, pumping her heart. But there was no response. Nothing. Bella's eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, her arms hanging limply at her sides. Jacob leaned over Bella, her chest expanding as he blew a lungful of air into her mouth before again resuming chest compressions. Renesmee let out a strangled cry as we both watched the scene before us. I froze in place, horrified by what I was seeing, shattered and terrified and in a state of utter shock. I knew I should do something, that I should help. But a crushing anguish washed over me, locking me in a prison of ice and stone. I watched, helpless, as my wife lay dead. What are you waiting for? Jacob growled, not looking up from his task. His words were enough to jolt me from my stupor. I needed to act now, before it was too late if it wasn't too late already. Take the baby, I pleaded, holding her out toward him. Throw it out the window, he hissed between compressions. Give her to me. My eyes followed the sound of the voice to Rosalie standing in the doorway, arms stretched forward. I growled under my breath, eyeing her warily, feeling suddenly very protective of the daughter I held in my arms. I've got it under control. I promise. Give me the baby, Edward. I'll take care of her until Bella, oh, God. I hesitated, but felt I had little choice. Rosalie appeared to be in control of her hunger, but there wasn't time to scrutinize her further. I gave her a warning glare as I handed Renesmee to her waiting hands. The corner of Rosalie's mouth turned up as she cradled the newborn in her arms and hastened from the room. Jacob was still counting under his breath, still struggling to restart Bella's heart. I snatched the syringe of venom from the table and moved to Bella's side. Move your hands, Jacob. Jacob paused to look up. What's that? Frustrated, I shoved his hands out of the way, hearing the familiar crunch of bone in the process. And thrust the needle through Bella's chest, straight into her heart. My venom, I answered as I pushed the plunger down, causing her silent heart to shudder. Keep it moving, I ordered. The venom was enough to jolt her heart awake, but in her state, it would take more than that to save her. As Jacob resumed chest compressions, I knelt beside her head. I'm sorry, I whispered in her ear. I pushed back her hair and bit down on her slender neck, injecting more venom, and sealing the wound closed. I then moved to her arm and her wrists and so on, recreating the wounds given to me when Carlyle changed me in an effort to introduce as much venom in as many points on her body as possible. The initial jolt of her heart had been just that and, though Jacob was continuing to pump her heart, it seemed reluctant to respond. It can't be too late, I thought to myself. I stood over her, watching Jacob work, feeling helpless as I waited for the venom to take effect, to work its magic. There's nothing, just me, just him. Working over a corpse. I lowered my head into my hands and tugged at my hair as I listened to Jacob's thoughts. He was giving up. She's not there anymore, he thought. Longing to get away from here and never, ever come back. Go, then, I seethed, shoving his hands out of the way. He would be of no help to Bella if he didn't believe she could be saved. I resumed compressions myself, ignoring Jacob as he stood silently. She's not dead, I growled. She's going to be fine. But was she? Her heart protested at each compression, her blood thickening as I forced it to continue its flow. Her skin was growing cold and her pallor even more pale. She laid perfectly still, her eyes staring blankly upward. Dead. I squeezed my eyes shut as a strangled cry escaped my lips. The tears I could not shed burned behind my eyes. I felt trapped, like a desperate man hiding in an attic crawlspace, clawing in hopeless agony at a wooden floor. The memory flooded my consciousness, reminding me of how it felt to lose her once. And I could feel that same familiar darkness creeping over me now. Every memory of her flashed before my eyes in a fraction of a second. Too short. We were supposed to spend eternity together. Forever. I wasn't ready to let her go. We had been through so much, struggled to be together. And she had fought with her very life just to bring our daughter into this world. She deserved better than this. For such a beautiful soul to be ripped from this world. No. I pounded my fist on the table and forced myself upright again, resuming chest compressions. She's not dead. She's not dead. I repeated my mantra over and over, forcing myself to keep trying. Bella would not have given up on me. I couldn't give up on her. Not ever. I pumped her heart faster, compelling the viscous blood to flow, forcing the venom through to every cell in her body. I closed my eyes, unable to focus on her face, on her blank expression. I couldn't allow myself to see her like this. It was too much for me to bear, too final. Please, Bella, I begged, whispering my prayer to anyone who would listen. Please come back to me. I need you. Renesmee needs you. Please. My voice broke, overcome by the grief that threatened to crush me. Unbidden, the thoughts rushed into my mind. What if I was too late? What if this doesn't work? How could I survive in this world without her? I lived for 100 years without knowing this kind of love, but I didn't believe I could endure a life without her. She was everything to me. Selfishly, I clung to the hope that if she did not revive, that I could resume my efforts to provoke the Volturi and join her in death. But I couldn't do that. Not now, not with Renesmee. Our daughter would be the only piece of Bella that I had left, the only part of her I could keep with me. She had the same eyes, the same blushing cheeks, the same hold on my heart. Bella had been right. She knew that if she didn't survive the birth, that I wouldn't be able to abandon our child. And I couldn't. Bella, please, I sobbed. I love you. Please come back. I don't know how to do this without you. Then, without warning, my prayers were heard. Her silent heart sputtered, like an old engine starting up after a long stretch of dormancy. The sputtering rapidly increased until her heart was pounding so fiercely that the vibrations traveled up through my arms. Bella, I gasped, feeling a flood of relief wash over me. I lifted my hands and her heart continued to hammer in her chest, pumping, working, changing. I leaned over, cupping her face in my palms and placing an impassioned kiss on her forehead. Bella, I whispered, can you hear me? She was perfectly still. If I could not hear her heart, I wouldn't believe that anything had changed. Her eyes still stared blankly at the ceiling. Something's not right, I thought to myself. I remembered all too vividly the pain of the change, the intense agony. As the venom scorched its way through my veins. She should be screaming in anguish, but her lips remained silent and her expression tranquil. Did I do something wrong? Was it possible that I had introduced too much venom into her bloodstream? Was the injection into her heart too much for her? Would it have an effect opposite to the one that was desired? I knelt by her side, one hand tugging on my hair in frustration and the other gripping her unresponsive fingers. The only reassurance I had was the continued staccato of her heart, so loud that it echoed throughout the room. Blowing out a slow breath, I cupped her hand to my cheek and laid my head down beside her, closing my eyes. The stress of the day, of the last weeks, settled over me, leaving me weak and emotionally exhausted. A small hand gripped my shoulder and I lifted my head to see Alice standing beside me. She smiled softly and wrapped her arms around my neck, hugging me tightly. She's going to be fine, she whispered. I shook my head. Even from Alice, the news was difficult to believe. Are you sure? She raised an eyebrow. Really, Edward? Did you hit your head? Did you forget who you're talking to? No, I shrugged. But before, Bella's entire future was being dictated by her pregnancy. Now that the two have been separated, it's much easier for me to see. I nodded weakly. I wanted to believe Alice, more than I ever wanted to believe her before. But this was so strange, so far distanced from what was expected that I found it difficult to believe any reassurance. Alice patted my shoulder and moved to Bella's other side, smiling as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She splayed her hand across Bella's face and gently closed her eyes, making her appear asleep rather than departed. I thought you might like some help. Alice offered. Help? She tilted her head to the side. Well, if Jasper hopes to leave the attic any time in the next few days, we might want to clean up. I followed, her gaze to the resulting chaos left by Renesmee's delivery. Blood pooled around Bella's body, dripping from the table to the floor in crimson puddles. I cringed, seeing the bruised and mutilated remains. It was no wonder that the mothers in Cowray's stories did not survive. But as I stared, I saw something amazing. The incision in Bella's abdomen had grown smaller, the venom already working to knit her body back together. Although still wary, I found myself bolstered by this new discovery. Alice disappeared from the room and reappeared seconds later with an armful of cloths and a bucket of water held in the crook of her other arm. She set them both down on Carlisle's desk and set to work. She poured some water into a small basin and dipped a clean cloth into the water as she began whip. ing it gently across Bella's blood-stained skin. The white cloth quickly tinged pink as she dragged it across Bella's body. I reached out, stilling her hands, and took the bowl and cloth for myself. Feeling the need to be of use, I continued to cleanse Bella's body. Alice nodded and gathered the bucket, kneeling as she began to mop up the floor. We worked in tandem at a human's pace as we cleaned up the mess that had been made. Within the hour, both Bella and the room were free of any trace of blood. The scent of bleach permeated the room and a waft of smoke drifted up from the small fire Alec built outside to burn the blood-soaked cloths. The damage done by the scalpel was almost completely sealed, the only evidence of the delivery, a slender pink seam that ran the width of Bella's abdomen. Her heart continued to beat, but she remained as still as a corpse, unlike any transitioning vampire I had ever witnessed. Alice returned with a clean sheet and draped it across Bella's body, giving her the illusion of slumber. "That should do for now," she whispered to herself. "I have something special for her to wear when she wakes up." "Thank you, Alice," she smiled. "It was my pleasure. Least I could do after how little use I was during her pregnancy." "That wasn't your fault," I murmured. "I know, but it still bothered me that I couldn't help. I hate being blind. I'm sorry I was hard on you on everyone. That wasn't fair." She waved her hand dismissively. Water under the bridge. If Jasper's life had been threatened like this, I would have been out of my head with worry, too. I would have done anything to save him. I know you would, just as Carlisle would do anything for Esme and Emmett, anything for Rosalie. But it still doesn't make it right. She waved me off as she moved toward the door. "I'll be back in a little while with Bella's dress. But now I should tell Jasper it's okay to come out. But the couch and the carpet? Taken care of." She smiled. I should have known that Alice wouldn't have missed a thing. She rarely did, especially where Jasper was concerned. He was lucky to have her. We all were. I was once again alone with my wife. With the blood washed away and her skin wiped clean, she looked almost serene. But that nagging thought in the back of my mind wouldn't disappear if the venom was working as it should. Why was she so peaceful? Her reactions should be anything but peaceful, the absolute antithesis of it. I remembered when Carlisle had changed Emmett. He used morphine in advance of the venom just as I had here, but Emmett behaved just as we all had, screaming, thrashing, begging for death. I could not find a reasonable explanation for Bella's divergence from the standard. Then again, she always said and did the unexpected. It was one of the many things I loved about her. Why should this be any different? The house was quiet, save for the beating of 3 hearts. 3. The first 2 belonged to Bella and to Jacob, but the third was new. Renesmee. Her heart thrummed like the beating of a hummingbird's wings. It was certainly unexpected. We heard no heartbeat when she was in the womb. It must have been the protective barrier that prevented us from hearing. Just as the ultrasound bounced uselessly off the barrier so we could not see inside, the sound of her heart beating must have resonated off the walls within and remained hidden from us. It was still difficult for me to believe that I had a daughter. I never thought it would be possible. I had long ago given up on the notion. The thought hadn't occurred to me, even after I found Bella. We had been given something miraculous. A true gift. Almost on cue, Rosalie appeared in the doorway with Renesmee swaddled in her arms. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" she asked, walking toward me. I stood and took her from Rosalie's outstretched arms. She looked up at me with intelligent eyes and smiled as she reached her tiny hands toward my face. Her skin was porcelain, the same color Bella's had been, and the same blush I loved so much stained her round cheeks. I cradled her in my arms and leaned down, brushing my lips gently across her forehead. I glanced up to see Rosalie running her fingers through Bella's hair, smoothing out the tangles. I watched with curiosity, my sister who, on the surface, seemed to have a singular uncaring focus. She felt my eyes on her and looked up. "She'll be radiant. I'm happy for you both," she whispered, smiling. "I'm sorry for the way I've acted. It was never my intention to hurt you. I was only doing what Bella asked of me. I know Bella chose me because I would understand what she wanted, because it was something I have wanted for myself just as desperately. And I know I've given Bella a hard time for the choices she's made. For her willingness to give up her humanity. But I think, through all this, I understand her a little better, too." I could see the sincerity in her eyes and hear it in her voice. For all the horrible thoughts I had about my sister in the past weeks, her intentions were motivated not by selfishness but by love. I turned my gaze back to the child in my arms and I couldn't imagine missing out on this. I nearly destroyed this tiny miracle in my ignorance and fear. She nuzzled in the crook of my arm and closed her eyes, her thoughts content. "Thank you, I whispered, glancing up at Rosalie. She nodded as she turned to exit the room. She stopped in the doorway and turned her head slightly. I'm glad you see now that she was worth protecting. She was so right. A pang of guilt stabbed my heart as I imagined what we would have missed out on had Bella conceded and allowed us to terminate the pregnancy. I sat back down at Bella's side and watched as Renesmee began to dream. It was a marvel to witness. Who would have imagined such a child was possible? There was so much we could learn from her. Just by coming into this world, she had taught me so much. I felt more at ease with her in my arms. Like I was holding a piece of Bella next to my heart as I waited for her to return to me. Renesmee's warmth seeped through me. She was warm, like Bella, but her temperature appeared to run about 10 degrees hotter. I brought her tiny hand to my lips and kissed her fingers. Her scent was similar to Bella's as well, though altered a bit through my genetic influence. I eased back in the chair and closed my eyes, imagining that I could sleep as peacefully as Renesmee was, as still as Bella appeared to be. A blanket of calm surrounded me, no doubt a gift from my brother. I could feel myself sink deeper into the chair, deeper into a state of relaxation. It was the first release of tension I had felt in weeks. I don't know how much time passed as Renesmee slept in my arms. Her dreams filled my head with thoughts of her mother, of Bella. A strong hand gripped my shoulder and I slowly opened my eyes. I turned my head to see a smiling Carlyle standing above me. There was wonder in his eyes, tinged with sadness and disappointment. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I nodded, knowing there was nothing he could have done to prevent it. We had no way of predicting that Bella would go into labor while he was away. I shifted in my chair, easing Renesmee from the crook of my arm. Carlyle gazed at her with admiration and love. I stood up and held her out to him. Would you like to hold your granddaughter? Quote, time passed far too slowly. Each tick of the clock echoed through the room, resounding deep within my bones, only accentuating the silence that had fallen over the house in the wake of Jacob's declaration. Anger still burned in the pit of my stomach, but there was little I could do. All manner of malevolent things I wanted to do to Jacob swirled in my mind. Bella would be angry with me if I harmed him. Although, when she awoke and discovered what had transpired, she may be apt to kill him herself. It was in the moments that Carlyle held my daughter in his arms that my mind began to calm enough to resume its normal function. The singular focus required to save Bella was no longer required and the thoughts of the house began to filter through my mind once more. It was then that I listened to Jacob's mind, heard the unequivocal shift in his mindset. His thoughts, once scattered and volatile, were now converged in a single harmonious endeavor: the care and well-being of Renesmee. The deviation from his normal thought patterns puzzled me for a moment before the realization began to set in. I had seen this before, seen it in my dealings with the pack, in those who had imprinted. Jacob had imprinted on my daughter. The concept still wouldn't settle in my brain. The notion of imprinting was arduous enough to fathom on a theoretical level, let alone trying to understand it when it involved someone so close, someone so important. It was difficult to maintain any level of reason when the subject of the imprint was your own child. I knew that I would be forced to endure some modicum of Jacob's presence in our lives due to his friendship with Bella, though a small part of me hoped that he would abscond the moment her heart stopped beating. And a part of me really thought that he would. His thoughts were so despondent following the birth, so absolutely set on leaving and never coming back, that I in no way imagined he would stay, let alone fasten himself to us for eternity. I shuddered at the thought. How strange for him to go from being my rival for Bella's heart to being the one who would one day strive to earn the heart of my daughter. It would no doubt be a difficult and awkward discussion we could one day look forward to having with Renesmee. I glanced up at the clock. I could swear that the hands had stopped. Nearly 20 hours had passed since the moment the venom began to work in Bella's body. I held her still fingers between my own, gently caressing her cool skin, a stark contrast to the scorching heat of venom I remembered all too well. I pressed my lips to her hand and I could already feel the resistance, her soft human skin restructuring and hardening like my own. The change was visible throughout her entire body. Her wounds were healed, her scars and bruises erased, even her hair had acquired a new luster. She was exquisite, but it still didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the nervous feeling in the pit of my stomach that something had gone terribly wrong. Carlyle had assured me that I did everything right, that he couldn't have done any better himself, but no measure of reassurance would set my mind at ease. And I refused to leave her side until she would awaken and assuage my fears. Esme had nearly begged me to take my leave, if for nothing else than to hunt, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I had promised to stay by her side, to be with her to usher her into the next phase of her existence, and I would keep my promise, no matter the cost to myself. Jasper strolled in, leaning casually against the bookcase that held an extensive collection of medical journals. He did his best to hide it from me, but I caught a fleeting glimpse of Bella's emotional state before he squelched it, imposing an almost suffocating blanket of calm over me. Even that brief insight into her mind forced the air from my lungs before Jasper's influence compelled me into an unnatural state of tranquility. Although the thought of her in such distress threatened to cripple me, it did provide the tiniest amount of reassurance that the transition was proceeding normally. Carlisle and Esme also appeared in the doorway, moving to stand by my side. Despite Jasper's efforts, I could feel a growing unease. They were doing their best to control their thoughts, preventing me from seeing something. But what? Carlisle spoke first, but I heard his thoughts just as they preceded his words. Jacob's back, he said. A low growl rumbled in my chest at the mention of his name. At the same time, I could hear the opening and closing of the door downstairs, the loud thumping heartbeat, the whispered greeting. Footsteps echoed through the house, growing louder as they neared. Jasper moved closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. Esme's eyes nervously flitted from the empty doorway to me, her concern growing as Jacob's footsteps drew closer. And then he appeared in the doorway, that familiar smug expression on his face. That same stench coming off of him in waves. His thoughts were calmer than they had been in weeks, but an edge of tension still tinged them as his eyes met mine. I moved to stand, but Jasper's hand clamped firmly on my shoulder, forcing me back into my seat. Stay put. Hello, Jacob, Carlisle greeted him with a nod, holding out his hand. Surprisingly, Jacob shook his hand without hesitation, nodding in return. What do you want, Jacob? I growled. Edward, Esme chastised. He's only trying to help. It's okay, Jacob waved her off. I know I'm not his favorite person right now. What gave you that impression? I shot back. Lucky guess, he snickered. It's not like I asked for this, you know. It was involuntary. I couldn't help it, but it might explain. I let go of Bella's hand for fear of hurting her and leaned back, folding my arms across my chest. All eyes oscillated between Jacob and myself, concern tinging their thoughts. I went to speak with Sam, Jacob continued. And, I prompted, Nessie isn't in any danger. I explained the situation. Jacob paused, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. The most important law we have regards the protection of those who have been imprinted on. And because Esme let out a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. That is good news, Carlisle agreed. And Bella? I asked. The treaty hasn't been broken. I explained in that I had given you permission to change Bella, to save her. Because I'm the rightful heir and would have been alpha, Sam had no choice but to accept my decision. The pack isn't happy about the circumstances. But they will honor the treaty. Thank you, Jacob. Carlisle smiled, offering his hand to Jacob once more. I unfolded my arms and, begrudgingly letting go of some of my pride, I nodded. Yes, Jacob, thank you. At that moment, Rosalie appeared in the doorway with Renesmee tucked in the crook of her arm. It's time, she whispered to Carlisle. Carlisle nodded and moved across the room to take the sleeping child from her arms. Where a human infant would receive a medical exam every few months, our daughter received hers every 6 hours. From conception to birth, her life measured barely a month. Yet she was born at full term. So, it would stand to reason that her rate of growth would continue to be accelerated, much to the concern of everyone else around her. Carlisle was meticulous in his study and measurements, noting the growth and changes at regular intervals, trying to determine if the rate would slow. It worried me to see her growing so rapidly, changing by the minute. It was a stark contrast to Bella's agonizingly slow transformation. Another 3/4 of an inch, Carlisle murmured under his breath. I watched his mind spin with calculations and projections. I reached for Bella's hand once more, willing her to respond, but her fingers remained frozen. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, pressing my lips to her knuckles. I needed her here with me. I needed her to help me deal with all of these new emotions that were welling inside me, all the confusion and resentment regarding this new complication with Jacob and what it would mean for our daughter. All the worry that our daughter's life was fleeting and would disappear from this world as quickly as it arrived. A fresh wave of calm washed over me. I glanced up at Jasper and he shrugged. All in due time for now. You need to try and relax. You're an emotionally jumbled mess. Thank you, I whispered. That's enough for now, Esme whispered as she scooped Renesmee up in her arms. She smiled and reached for Esme's face, eliciting a heartwarming smile in return. I smiled to myself as I watched the replay of memories and dreams in Esme's mind as our amazing daughter showed them to her. Anything else we had discovered since her birth was Renesmee's ability, much like my own. Where I can hear the thoughts in someone's mind, she could place her own thoughts into theirs. She seemed to, though, roughly enjoy having the chance to communicate in this way, to share her memories and thoughts with her family. It was quite a shock when she first shared her thoughts with Carlyle during one of his examinations. Alice appeared in the doorway, her arms loaded with overstuffed shopping bags. She smiled widely at Esme. "Time for another photo shoot," she beamed. Esme chuckled and shook her head. As if Alice needed another excuse to shop. She had delighted in the arrival of our daughter and all the pretty little things she could buy for her. It didn't matter that she grew too quickly to wear any of the clothes more than once. Alice was determined that she would be the best-dressed baby in the state and set out to record every moment she could on film. The pictures they had taken could already fill several albums. It was a welcome distraction after the turmoil our house had been thrown in as of late. And it was good to have a record of this time. Bella would want to know all that she had missed while we waited for her to come back to us. Esme and Alice disappeared from the room with the baby, but Jacob stayed behind. Jasper remained at my side as Carlyle took a seat in the chair across from me. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I shrugged. "Why don't you ask him?" I jutted my thumb at Jasper. "It's difficult to discern my true feelings when I'm having them forced on me." Jasper rolled his eyes. "It's for your own good." He turned to Carlyle. "He's a wreck," he muttered. "I would imagine so." Carlyle nodded. "The events of the last day, of the last weeks even, have been more than anyone could be expected to bear. You should be grateful that Jasper has this ability and cares enough to help." "I know," I sighed. "And I do appreciate it." Jasper pursed his lips, suppressing a grin, and nodded. "Time's a-wasting," Jacob thought. "Is there something else?" I asked, peering past Carlyle to Jacob who still hovered in the doorway. "I said I went to speak to Sam. And, he came back with me to speak with Carlyle, to smooth things over." I could feel Jasper tense beside me. Surprised, Carlyle turned to face Jacob. "He wishes to speak with me?" he asked. Jacob nodded. "He's just outside the perimeter. I told Leah and Seth that he wasn't here to cause trouble, but they're keeping an eye on him. I don't know if he would be comfortable changing into human form. We might need." "No," I said flatly, knowing full well what Jacob would ask. "Edward," Carlyle reasoned, "it would be very helpful if you would help translate. Please be reasonable. I'm not leaving her. If he wants to speak with you, then tell him to speak." Carlyle sighed and rose from his chair. "Can I get you anything?" he asked. "It's been weeks since you've hunted." I shook my head. "No, not until she wakes." "Edward," he pressed, his tone concerned. "Please, you may not want to speak to Sam, but you still need to." I said no. I looked up, seeing the disappointment in Carlyle's eyes. "I've gone longer spans of time than this without hunting. It's only a couple more days. I'll be fine. I won't leave her." Carlyle breathed a heavy sigh and shook his head. His worried thoughts hung heavy in the air even after he had left the room. Jacob still lingered in the doorway, his thoughts warring with one another. "Can you promise me something?" I arched an eyebrow. "Let me tell Bella about, well, you know." "Why should I?" I scoffed. "I think she'll take the news better from me. Coming from you, well, let's just say that you're a little biased." I blew out a slow breath, not liking the idea of allowing Jacob to broach this subject with Bella. But I guessed that I owed him at least this one thing after all he had done for us. I could let him tell his side of the story, but Bella didn't necessarily have to agree with it. I sighed and nodded my assent. Jacob nodded his thanks and disappeared from the room. I laid my head down beside Bella's and laced my fingers with hers. Closing my eyes, I listened only to her heartbeat, to its steady, staccato rhythm, and waited for the time when it would be as silent as mine. Still no change?" Carlyle asked. "So unusual." I raised my head. Carlyle held Bella's wrist between his fingers as he felt her pulse. "None," I whispered, pressing my lips to her hand. More time had passed and Bella remained absolutely frozen. I had gone far past worry, to an indescribable place of agonizing concern, my thoughts tormenting me, taunting me that I had done something wrong, that I had done this to her. "There's no scent of the morphine left," Carlyle commented. "I know, Bella," I whispered in her ear. "Can you hear me?" I had spoken to her so many times over the hours, begged and pleaded with her to respond in some small way. But all my attempts were fruitless. It was a meaningless exercise now, merely something to pass the time. I had lost hope that she would respond to my voice, but still I pressed on. Bella, Bella, love, can you open your eyes? Can you squeeze my hand? Quote, I waited, watching her fingers as I held them in mine. Not a twitch, not even a quiver. Nothing. Maybe Carlyle, maybe I was too late, I whispered, the words sticking in my throat. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Listen to her heart, Edward. It's stronger than even Emmett's was. I've never heard anything so vital. She'll be perfect, but there had been so much damage. And her spine. Carlyle shook his head, memories of Esme lingering in his thoughts. Her injuries weren't so much worse than Esme's. The venom will heal her as it did Esme. But she's so still, I must have done something wrong. He gripped my shoulder harder. Or something right, Edward. Son, you did everything I could have and more. I'm not sure I would have had the persistence, the faith it took to save her. Stop berating yourself. Bella is going to be fine. She must be in agony, I whispered. We don't know that. She had so much morphine in her system. We don't now the effect that will have on her experience. I lowered my head, pressing my lips to her arm. The scar was gone, but the memory of every place marked with my teeth was seared in my memory. Bella, I love you, I whispered, choking back a sob. Bella, I'm sorry. Carlyle paced the room, running over the measurements from Renesmee's last exam in his mind, comparing them to all the data he had gathered since her birth. Raised voices from downstairs drifted upward, the unmistakable intonation from Jacob and the scathing retort from Rosalie. Not again. Do you think you should? No, I whispered. I'm staying right here. They'll sort it out. An interesting situation, Carlyle remarked. And I thought I'd seen just about everything. I shook my head. I'll deal with it later. We'll deal with it. I pressed my lips to Bella's hand. Carlyle chuckled. I'm sure, between the five of us, we can keep it from turning into bloodshed. I don't know which side to take. I sighed, weary of the arguing. I'd love to flog them both. Well, later. I wonder what Bella will think, whose side she'll take, Carlyle mused. I'm sure she'll surprise me. I ran the back of my hand along her cheek. She always does. I lifted my head as Alice strolled into the room with a garment bag draped over her arm. How much longer? I asked. It won't be long now. She smiled, showing me a nearly clear picture of Bella waking. See how clear she's becoming. I can see her so much better. Still feeling a little bitter. Alice scrunched her nose and huffed as she unzipped the garment bag and pulled out a pale blue silk gown. Yes, thanks so much for bringing it up, she grumbled. You would be mortified, too, if you realized that you were handcuffed by your own nature. I see vampires best, because I am one. I see humans okay. Because I was one, but I can't see these odd half-breeds at all because they're nothing I've experienced. Bah, the corner of my mouth ticked up at Alice's display. Focus, Alice. She shook her head. Right, Bella's almost too easy to see now. Alice closed her eyes a moment, focusing her mind on Bella. The picture was clearer, she was perfect. I breathed a sigh of relief. She's really going to be fine, I breathed, still hesitant to believe it. Of course she is, Alice scoffed as she carefully slipped the silk fabric over Bella's skin. You weren't so sanguine 2 days ago, I countered. I couldn't see right 2 days ago. But now that she's free of all the blind spots, it's a piece of cake. Could you concentrate for me? On the clock, give me an estimate. So impatient, she sighed. Give me a sec. She closed her eyes once more, her mind focused on the clock in Carlyle's study. I watched as the hands spun around the clock's face, measuring the passage of time. To my surprise, the clock jumped forward 6 hours from now. I could feel the weight on my chest beginning to lift. Thank you, Alice. She nodded and skipped toward the door. She stopped just inside the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame. She's going to be dazzling. She always has been. Alice snorted. You know what I mean. Look at her. And she was right. The vision of Bella in Alice's mind was nothing short of perfection, everything I knew she was and everything she would become in this new life. It was difficult to believe that, in only a few short hours, our family would be complete. But the thought did give me pause. Bella would awaken as a newborn, with all the challenges that accompanied this life. I could hear Renesmee's fluttering heartbeat floor below me and knew that we would have to take precautions. Bella would never forgive herself if she did something to harm our daughter, even by accident, not after everything she sacrificed and endured to bring her into this world. My hand reached out, skimming the delicate fabric of the gown she now wore. Blue. Of course Alice would think to dress her in my favorite color. Even with the change in Bella's skin tone, the color still looked exquisite on her. I ran my fingers through her hair, resting my palm on her cheek. I listened intently, hoping that with the change, her mind would also be altered, allowing me to finally see a glimpse into her thoughts. I was beginning to lose hope that whatever anomaly in her mind prevented me from hearing her innermost thoughts would be changed by the venom. It seemed that her mind would forever remain a mystery. I laid my head down again, breathing slowly in and out, noting the diminishing aroma of the blood that once called so strongly to me. The scents of lavender and freesia still lingered, but they were forever altered by the venom that now pulsed through her veins. Sounds drifted up the stairway, but I blocked them out, focusing my attention on the sound of Bella's beating heart. Even with Alice's predictions, her changing heart would be the best indicator of when she would awake. I listened intently, waiting for the beats to increase their tempo before they would cease forever. I collected the sound of each heartbeat, storing them away in my perfect memory, a lasting tribute to a human life, the one I fell in love with. The one willing to sacrifice everything for her family. Time continued to pass slowly, marked only by the changing sounds of life elsewhere in the house. In this room, we were unchanging. At least that was how it felt, like we were placed in a vacuum where time stood still, where the pain in my heart rippled through me at regular intervals. I could still taste the lingering flavor of Bella's blood on my lips. Even if she would come back to me, I still mourned the loss of her humanity, the loss of her soul. And then something happened. The perpetual stillness of the room began to shift. I lifted my head as the sound of her heart began to increase in tempo. The steady beating gradually grew faster and faster until her heart was hammering in her chest at a speed much too quick for any human to endure. This was it, this was the end of our waiting. I squeezed her hand and could swear I saw the tiniest movement at the corner of her eyes. "Carlyle," I called. Mere seconds later, Carlyle came through the doorway, followed quickly by Alice. "Listen," I said. I could see the relief on Carlyle's face. Perhaps even he had some hidden doubts about her transformation. "Ah," he sighed. "It's almost over." Alice nodded emphatically. "Soon. I'll get the others." "What about Renesmee? Should I have Rosalie?" "Yes, keep the baby away." The fingers I held tightly in my hands twitched ever so slightly. My breath stopped as I looked up at Carlyle, wondering if he had seen the movement as well. It was the first clear sign that she was still with me, that I hadn't destroyed her in my effort to save her. Both he and Alice were looking with wide expectant eyes, seeing the movement, and now listening to the ever-increasing cadence of Bella's heart. Shaking off the shock, I squeezed her hand in response and leaned over, whispering in her ear, "Bella, Bella, love," but she didn't respond. Her lips were just as silent as they had been. I looked up at Carlyle, but he shook his head lightly, his thoughts encouraging. "I'll bring them right up," Alice said as she disappeared from the room. I heard the hushed, excited voices as my family began filtering into the room, standing at the perimeter, Jasper standing in front. Rosalie and Jacob were absent, keeping Renesmee safe out of sight. I glanced up and Esme smiled across the room, her thoughts hopeful and relieved. Alice, too, was excited for Bella to awaken, bouncing anxiously on the balls of her feet. Jasper, of course, was wary, having much more experience with newborns than all the rest of us combined. I could feel the force of his power enveloping the room in a blanket of serenity, doing his best to create a non-threatening environment for when Bella awoke. I squeezed Bella's hand again as I listened to her heart, the sound so loud that I thought it might beat out of her chest. The corners of her eyes creased again and I watched helplessly as her back arched off the table, her body convulsing before slumping back down. I had seen this before with my other siblings, but it still didn't lessen the sting of having to watch my love endure it. I remembered the pain too well, an excruciating torment that I never wished her to experience. I could feel the tension in her fingers and knew that she was in agony. I grimaced, a pang of guilt overwhelming me. I did this to her. No matter the result, it was my fault. That she was forced to endure this now. Nobody breathed. The room was silent as death as we listened to the rapid heartbeat come to a sudden halt. With 2 shuddering pulses, followed by a final quiet thump, her heart stopped. Nobody moved. All eyes were trained on Bella. Even the sounds in the remainder of the house had ceased as we all waited with bated breath for her to awaken. Agonizing seconds ticked by. I dared not move, frozen in place. I watched intently, willing her eyes to open, willing her to respond. And then she did. Bella's eyes opened slowly, the once chocolate brown now replaced by a vibrant ruby. "She's awake. See, Edward, I told you she would be perfect." Jasper was on high alert, watching vigilantly for any movement while exuding as much calm throughout the room as he could manage. I, on the other hand, felt my body relax fully for the first time in weeks, the concerning weight on my mind disappearing the instant her eyes opened. She stared above her, perfectly still. Yet her eyes gazed above her in wonder. She inhaled a gasping breath, followed by another, her nostrils flaring as she took in the varied scents in the room. I remembered the disorientation of my first days of this life. Everything was heightened to an almost unbearably intense degree. I had hoped that the transition might correct whatever anomaly in her mind kept me from hearing her thoughts. I longed to share this experience with her and see this new world through her eyes, but regrettably, her mind remained just as silent as it had been while she was human. I squeezed her hand lightly, hoping to reassure her that she was not alone. Her fingers stiffened and a low growl emanated through her clenched teeth as she leapt from the table, pressing her back against the wall in a defensive posture. Careful, calm, Jasper thought. She stared back at me and her expression changed from anxious to confused. Her reaction was not unusual for a newborn. It was understandable that she would be disoriented, and it could take some time before she began to feel like herself again, or at least this new version of herself. It was ridiculous, but I admit that it hurt to have her run from me. I extended my hand to her, demonstrating that I meant no harm. Bella's eyes scanned the room, her newborn senses assessing the level of danger, her eyes lingering nervously on Jasper. Her gaze shifted to my outstretched hand, and then her eyes met mine, widening with a mixture of recognition and awe. Her stance relaxed as she stared at me, our eyes locked as though we were seeing each other for the first time. I could feel the electricity sparking between us and absently wondered if the rest of our family could feel the charge as well. I took a cautious step toward her, listening to Jasper's assessment of her emotions and keeping a wary eye on her body language. I did not expect that Bella would do anything to harm me, but newborns were often unpredictable and the disorientation could cause them to do things they wouldn't purposely do. Careful, Edward. Bella, I whispered. She continued to stare at me as I gradually advanced. Her muscles tensed marginally, eliciting a new bout of calm from Jasper. Though it was a struggle for him to maintain while the level of tension in the room was so palpable. Bella, love, I continued. I'm sorry, I know it's disorienting. But you're all right, everything is fine. The corners of her eyes pinched as they darted from face to face, as though she was searching for something. I took another cautious step toward her, reaching out a tentative hand. Jasper and Emma tensed as my fingers glided across the smooth surface of her cheek. I marveled at the softness of it, now the same temperature as my own. The same familiar current of electricity hummed in my fingers, and, though the warmth of her skin and the blush of her cheeks had vanished, she was still my Bella. Her eyes searched mine. I wasn't sure what she was looking for. Reassurance, answers to questions about this new life. I cupped her cheek, taking another step forward until we were nearly flush with one another. She inhaled abruptly and I saw a spark of recognition in her eyes, a look of devotion that I hadn't expected to see quite too soon into this new life. She stared at me, silent and breathtaking. She hadn't spoken a word since she awoke, and I longed to hear how the change had altered her voice. If that too was something I would mourn the loss of. And then I was home, wrapped in her embrace. She pressed herself against me, wrapping her arms around my neck and nuzzling her cheek against my chest. Jasper advanced, cautious and prepared to restrain her. I glanced over to him and shook my head infinitesimally. This was what I had waited for, the days of agony, the weeks of waiting. As she slowly withered away before my eyes, she was finally whole again. She wrapped her arms more tightly around me and I could feel the strength of her newborn muscles, like coiled steel cables holding me prisoner. I would gladly stay in the imprisonment of her arms, but admittedly, now that her strength was greater than my own, the only sensation more prevalent than the contentment of her embrace was the pain of it. Reluctantly, I shifted, attempting to lessen her grip, to ease the discomfort. She looked up at me, her eyes concerned and confused. Carefully, Bella, I whispered. Ow. She recoiled, taking a step back and placing her arms behind her. She looked up at me with a sheepish expression. Oops, she mouthed. So controlled, very out of character for a newborn. Though her emotions are everywhere. I smiled, both at her reaction and Jasper's assessment. Don't panic, love, I reassured her. I reached out, eager to re-establish physical contact. You're just a bit stronger than I am for the moment. The space between her eyebrows puckered and I could hear a bit of satisfaction in her thoughts through Jasper's ability. I'd venture to guess that, after being the weak, human link for so long, it was gratifying to know that we were now on more equal footing. Bolstered by her display of control and emotion, I ran my fingers across her cheek again, awestruck by the beauty that had given so much for me. How had I been so lucky? After believing so completely that I had lost everything, to have my love stand before me with a look of such devotion in her eyes, I was overwhelmed with joy. Her emotions were torn and scattered, flitting from one to the next, but the overall emotion dominating them all was love. I smiled as her hand reached up and her fingers slid delicately across my cheek. Her eyes met mine with a look so piercing, it was as though she could see into the depths of the soul she always believed still resided within me. I love you, she spoke. Her voice now had a musical lilt to it, a beautiful chorus of tone, and her first words of this new life couldn't have been more perfect. A wide smile broke across my face. As I love you, I replied. I cupped her face in my hands and hesitantly moved closer, my lips eagerly searching for hers. It was reminiscent of our first kiss, though in that instance, it was I who needed to be careful not to harm her. Our lips touched and the humming electricity sparked, sending a current straight to my heart. Unable to contain my fervor, I pressed my lips more forcefully to hers. It was, for all intents and purposes, our first real kiss. The years of restraint had built up within me and, to be able to display every ounce of my true passion for her, was a welcome relief. She wrapped her arms around me, deepening the kiss. Her breath quickened and I could swear that Jasper was blushing from the emotional climate Bella was exuding. Judging by the other thoughts in the room, Jasper was having difficulty containing the emotions and they were beginning to seep out and affect everyone. Okay, get a room. Emmett cleared his throat. Bella's lips stilled against mine and she immediately released me, taking a step back. Her eyes were cast downward, though the telltale blush I had come to love was absent. I chuckled at her reaction. Unwilling to let her go, I stepped with her, keeping her in my embrace. She blew out a slow breath and looked up at me. You've been holding out on me, she teased, arching an eyebrow. I laughed at her response. It was sort of necessary at the time, I reminded her. Now it's your turn not to break me. She frowned, eliciting a bout of laughter from everyone. So different, but still so Bella. She's so controlled. I don't understand it. Uncharacteristic. Of a newborn, perhaps it was her preparation. Carlisle moved closer, eager to ask about her transition, about her current state. Everything about her change and her reactions since she awoke had his mind reeling with theories and postulations. Perhaps everything we knew about what we are and how we came into this life was based on incorrect assumptions. He was enthusiastic about the prospect of examining Bella and questioning every aspect of her experience. Jasper followed closely behind. How do you feel, Bella? Carlisle asked. She blew out a puff of air. Overwhelmed. There's so much. He nodded. Yes, it can be quite confusing. She nodded emphatically in agreement. But I feel like me. Sort of. I didn't expect that. I squeezed her to me. I had tried to reassure her that she would still be herself after the transition. Though even I was surprised that she seemed so much like her human self so quickly after her change. I told you so, I whispered in her ear. You are quite controlled. Carlisle nodded. More so than I expected, even with the time you had to prepare yourself mentally for this. It is quite astonishing. The corners of her eyes pinched as she thought briefly over Carlisle's comments. I'm not sure about that, she hedged. He nodded. The morphine, I wonder. It seems like we did something right with the morphine this time. Tell me, what do you remember of the transformation process? Everything was very dim before. I remember the baby couldn't breathe. Her gaze nervously turned to me, the question evident in her eyes. Renesmee is healthy and well, I assured her. What do you remember after that? The space between her brows puckered, as though she were struggling to find the memory. It's hard to remember. It was so dark before. And then I opened my eyes and I could see everything. Amazing, Carlisle breathed. Simply fascinating. If only we had known this sooner, I could have saved you all the pain of transformation. Fueled by intrigue, Carlisle pressed on. I want you to tell me everything you remember. Her expression fell, displaying some level of discomfort. She's a newly awakened newborn. She needs to feed. Jasper edged toward us half a step. Carlisle also noted her uneasiness. Oh, I'm so sorry, Bella, he apologized. Of course your thirst must be very uncomfortable. This conversation can wait. Her eyes pinched in. Her hand pressed against her throat as she swallowed reflexively. I reached for her hand and began pulling her toward the open window. Then I said 3 words that I never imagined I would say to her. Let's hunt, Bella. A shocked expression flickered across her face. It's quite easy, love, I assured her. Instinctual. Don't worry, I'll show you. She was frozen in place. though I was gently pulling her toward me. Her muscles were locked in place. I looked at her expectantly. I was under the impression that you'd always wanted to see me hunt, I teased. A peal of laughter bubbled up from her lips, but she stifled it with her hand before replacing it on her neck. Shall we? I reached up and took her other hand so that I held both her hands in mine. I don't want you to be hurting, I whispered. She shrugged nonchalantly. I'm fine. She hesitated, her brow furrowing in concentration. Wait, first, the pain should be unbearable. I don't understand how she's so calm, so rational. She needs to hunt. What is she waiting for? Isn't she supposed to be a newborn? Our family had a running commentary in their minds, but it was Carlyle who answered her. Yes. Her eyes opened widely. I want to see her. Renesmee. She pulled her hands away, resting them on her flattened stomach. Her eyes pinched and the fabric of her gown protested as she tugged it in her fists. It's not safe, not yet. We don't know how long it will be before Bella can see Renesmee. It's too soon to test her control. I nodded in agreement with Carlyle's thoughts. Bella looked up, glaring at the two of us. What? I reached for her hand again. Bella, that's not really a good idea. She's half human, love. Her heart beats, and blood runs in her veins. Until your thirst is positively under control, you don't want to put her in danger, do you? The space between her brows puckered, but as the seconds passed, she seemed to relax marginally. Where is she? She asked. Is Rosalie with her? Rosalie and the dog. Yes. I reached for her other hand and again started to tug her toward the window. She resisted. Wait, what about Jacob? And Charlie? Tell me everything that I missed. How long was I unconscious? Poor Charlie, he's been so worried. I can't wait till she hears the news. She's gonna rip Jacob to shreds. We need to handle this delicately. It's an unusual predicament we find ourselves in. I nodded, once again in agreement with Carlyle's thoughts. I was already on the verge of killing Jacob myself when Bella found out about the imprint on our daughter. I wasn't sure what she might do, but the volatility of her newborn emotions did not bode well for Jacob. Bella glanced nervously between us. What's wrong? She whispered. Nothing is wrong, Carlyle replied. Nothing has changed much, You were only unaware for just over 2 days. It was very fast, as these things go. Edward did an excellent job. Quite innovative. The venom injection straight to your heart was his idea. And a brilliant idea it was. We have much to be thankful for, though there are still troubles awaiting you. Jacob is still here, and Charlie still believes that you are sick. He thinks you're in Atlanta right now, undergoing tests at the CDC. We gave him a bad number and he's frustrated. He's been speaking to Esme. Bella lowered her eyes. I should call him, she whispered. I could see the sadness on her face as she thought of her father and all the worry this had put him through. A moment later her expression changed. Hold on, Jacob is still here. Unfortunately, I shot Carlyle a glare. RNING him that now may not be the best time to explain to her exactly why Jacob was still here. He nodded. Let's not explain that to her just yet. First and foremost, she needs to feed. Bella, I urged. There's much to discuss, but we should take care of you first. You have to be in pain. She swallowed. But Jacob, we have all the time in the world for explanations, love. She thought for a moment, but finally nodded. Okay. Oh no, not yet. Wait, Alice exclaimed as she moved to our side. You promised I could be there the first time. What if you two run past something reflective? Alice, I groaned. It will only take a second. She insisted as she ran from the room. What is she talking about? Bella asked. Before I could answer, Alice was coming through the door carrying a mirror twice her size. Jasper followed closely behind, wary of Alice's proximity to Bella. Edward gave me grief for not getting you to a mirror before the wedding, Alice explained. I'm not going to be chewed out again. Chewed out? Really, Alice? She casually tossed a hand in the air. Maybe I'm overstating things. She turned the mirror so that Bella could see her reflection. Abe, this had solely to do with your own voyeuristic gratification, I teased, eliciting a wink from Alice. Bella stared at her new reflection and I listened with rapt interest to the play of her emotions through Jasper's thoughts. Perhaps now she would finally believe what I had been trying to convince her of all this time, that she was the most ravishing creature I had ever met, beautiful both inside and out. The eyes, she whispered. Her stare didn't shift as she asked her question. She seemed trapped within her own gaze. How long? They'll darken up in a few months, I answered. Anima. Blood dilutes the color more quickly than a diet of human blood. They'll turn amber first, then gold. though they would never again be the chocolate brown I had come to love. Thankfully, that trait would be preserved in the eyes of our daughter. Her emotions were on edge, her voice anxious. Months. Careful, she's about to snap. Jasper stepped forward, sensing the sudden stress in Bella's emotional climate. The urge to grab Alice and move her out of the threat of harm was in the forefront of his mind. But Alice remained calm, not seeing any danger in her immediate future. Bella turned her reflection and looked from me to Alice, seeming confused by Jasper's reaction and the fact that her question had gone unanswered. She took a deep breath and shook her head slightly. No, I'm fine, it's just a lot to take in. Jasper took a startled step back. Impossible, I've never seen this kind of control in a newborn. How is she doing this, controlling her emotions? Fascinating. A product of her preparation or something more? Some unforeseen ability? I don't know, I murmured, answering his unspoken question. What question did I miss? Bella asked. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Bella always did the unexpected and, it seemed, the trend would continue in this new life as well. Jasper wonders how you're doing it. She frowned. Doing what? Controlling your emotions, Bella, Jasper answered. I've never seen a newborn do that, stop an emotion in its tracks that way. You were upset, but when you saw our concern, you reined it in, regained power over yourself. I was prepared to help. But you didn't need it. A concerned look crossed Bella's features. Is that wrong? She asked. Not exactly, no, he replied. It's very impressive, Bella, I reassured her, but we don't understand it. We don't know how long it can hold. Come on, give the girl some credit. Alice tapped her foot impatiently. But what do you think? She asked, gesturing to the mirror. Bella looked back at her reflection, tilting her head to the side as she examined her new self. I'm not sure, she hesitated. She stared at her face in the mirror and I longed to hear what she was thinking. She raised her hand, as though she expected that her reflection was a trick and not the mirror image of herself. I sighed, considering the improbable notion that she still didn't seem to see herself clearly. She turned to look at me, raising a questioning eyebrow. Disappointed? She asked. I laughed. Yes, Edward, he should know better than to antagonize her. Bella's face fell and I immediately regretted my joke. Alice and Jasper reacted even more strongly to my reply than Bella herself. I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around her and kissing her cheek. I was rather hoping that I'd be able to hear your mind. Now that it is more similar to my own. And here I am, frustrated as ever, wondering what could possibly be going on inside your head. The corner of her mouth twitched upward. Oh well, I guess my brain will never work right. At least I'm pretty. Bella, you have never been merely pretty, I growled in her ear. It's preposterous to keep delaying, she needs to hunt. This is highly dangerous. All right, I groaned. What? She asked. You're making Jasper more edgy by the second. He may relax a little when you've hunted. Bella looked over at Jasper and nodded. Okay, let's hunt. I smiled, taking her hand in mine and leading her toward the open window. She looked at me skeptically and then looked down at the ground below. The window? She asked, looking nervous. It's the most convenient exit, I explained. If you're frightened, I can carry you. Not that I would mind having the chance to cradle her against me. It had been so long that it felt painful when some part of me wasn't touching her. She made a face. We have all eternity, and you're worried about the time it would take to walk to the back door. Ah, is little Bella afraid of heights? No, the baby. I frowned. Renesmee and Jacob are downstairs. Oh, she looked out the window again, pulling her bottom lip between her teeth. Is Renesmee okay with Jacob there? He doesn't like her much. Oh, I wouldn't say that. Can't wait until she finds out, that should be good. The reminder of the wolf who imprinted on our daughter set me on edge. It was a conversation I was not looking forward to, though Emmett seemed to be looking forward to it with much anticipation. Trust me, she's perfectly safe. I know exactly what Jacob is thinking. Those thoughts must be interesting. Of course, she murmured, looking out the window again. I stole a warning glance at Emmett when she wasn't looking and he shrugged, chuckling lightly. Come on bro, you gotta admit, it is kind of funny. The urge to growl as I turned back to Bella. Stalling, I asked, anxious to get on with the hunt and away from the silent jibes from my brother. A little, Bella hedged. I don't know how. Watch me, I offered, stepping out into the open air and landing on the ground below. I looked up at the open window, waiting for her to follow. She stepped up to the edge, her face set in concentration. I Fought the urge to reach out to catch her, the memories of her human self still so fresh in my mind. She stepped out the window and seemed to float down to the ground until she landed gracefully on her feet. I watched in awe, seeing the transformation that had changed her from an awkward, stumbling human to such an elegant creature. She smiled. Right, easy. Wow, would you look at that? Looks hell. Ike, the Venom changed a lot more than just her look. Bella, yes, that was quite graceful even for a vampire. Her grin grew wider. Thank you. If she were still human, I was sure her cheeks would be flushed. She looked down and removed her shoes, tossing them back up through the window. Jasper, who was closest to the window, caught them easily. Seriously, Bella, Alice groaned. Her fashion sense hasn't improved as much as her balance. I took her hand and smiled as I began to run. She kept pace with me easily, a stark contrast from the way we had traveled together before. We crossed the backyard in seconds and stopped at the banks of the river. She looked puzzled. Are we swimming? And ruin your pretty dress? No, we're jumping. She looked across the river, seeming to judge the distance. She looked back at me. You first. I reached up and smiled, stroking her cheek. I took 2 steps back and then leapt across the river, feeling free as the air whizzed past my ears. I net a flip just before I landed in the trees on the other side. Show off, I heard her mutter under her breath. I laughed and waited, watching for her to cross. I heard her footsteps, followed by the sound of tearing fabric. Confused, I listened and heard another sound of ripping fabric. I heard laughter from the house and could see through the eyes of my family that Bella had altered her dress, likely to make it easier for jumping. Only Alice would think to dress her in something as impractical as a gown for her first hunt, though Alice might not have considered that Bella would be hunting in the dress when she chose it for her. I watched Bella through their eyes, waiting for her to join me on the other side of the river. She stood stock still and I wondered what she was waiting for. Was she afraid? Bella, I called. Do you want to watch again? My voice seemed to snap her out of whatever stupor she had found herself in, because the next moment she was flying through the air, just as graceful as before. And then she was gone. She was out of sight, though I could still hear her laughter. Her leap had been at least twice the distance of mine and I had to run to catch up. She was still high in the air, standing on a branch above. She leapt from the branch and landed at my side, smiling widely. Was that good? She asked. I nodded. Very good. Surprisingly good. This was going to take some getting used to. Can we do it again? She asked with enthusiasm. Focus, Bella, we're on a hunting trip, I reminded her, still finding it odd how a newborn could think of anything else other than their thirst. Oh, right, she nodded. Hunting. Follow me if you can. We had never run together like this before. I smiled at the thought, excited to share this new experience with her. I broke into a sprint, running headlong into the deep forest. My focus was split between watching Bella as she ran to catch up with me and searching the forest around us for the presence of any humans. I led her deep into the wilderness where I was relatively certain we would be unlikely to encounter any temptations, and the wildlife was more plentiful the further we traveled from civilization as well. It took no time at all for Bella to catch up with me. The strength in her newborn legs propelling her forward until her stride began to match my own. I glanced over and her smile was radiant. She gazed around her in wonder and light laughter peeled from her lips. I longed to see into her thoughts, to know what she was thinking. For most of us, we knew nothing of this life before it was thrust upon us. But for Bella, she was aware of so much more before she decided to take on this new life. She was privy to knowledge before her change that likely gave her a unique perspective, a comparison between how she viewed vampires as a human and how she experienced being one now. Moments later, Bella was beginning to pull away with me, traveling much faster than I was. I had to push myself just to keep up, which, admittedly, was a new experience for me. I was so accustomed to being the fastest, it was rare that I would be the one falling behind. We continued on for miles until I began to wonder if Bella had again forgotten why we were out here. I came to a halt and called out for her. Bella, I heard a soft sigh in the distance and, a moment later, she was at my side, smiling angelically. Did you want to stay in the country? I teased. Or were you planning to continue on to Canada this afternoon? This is fine. She paused, seeming briefly distracted. What are we hunting? Elk. I thought something easy for your first time. She seemed skeptical, but eager. Where? She asked, her eyes scanning the forest. I reached up, placing my hands on her shoulders. Hold still for a minute. She stopped, stone still. Now close your eyes. Listen. What do you hear? I waited patiently. For a newborn that was only hours old, listening to the clamor of noises that her knew hate. Ned hearing aloud could be quite confusing. It could take some time for her to filter through all the noise to determine the sound she was looking for. I remembered Carlyle when he tried to teach M. We had to travel miles and miles away from civilization so that I could separate the sounds of the forest from the din of thoughts that normally filled my head. By the creek, to the northeast? She asked. Very good. Yes. Now wait for the breeze again, and what do you smell? A moment later, her nose wrinkled. The elk's blood would sat her thirst, but it was definitely not what her newborn body desired. It would be an acquired taste. I know, I laughed. It takes some getting used to. 3, she guessed. 5, there are 2 more in the trees behind them. What do I do now? She asked, sounding nervous and unsure. What do you feel like doing? I watched as her nostrils flared and her head inclined toward the sounds of the elk nearby. Her fingers twitched with anxious energy as she opened her eyes. Don't think about it, I told her, dropping my hands. Just follow your instincts. She began moving, gracefully stalking her prey like the apex predator she was. The sound of rushing water grew louder as we neared. She crouched down as the elk came into view. I could see her eyes focused on the hunt. This was certainly not the Bella I remembered, the one I would never have dared allow on a hunt. As strange as this new experience must be for her, it was stranger still for me to witness such a disparity between her human self and this new lithe and dangerous creature. She was motionless as she stalked her prey. The elk drank from the stream, utterly oblivious to our presence. I watched her dip slightly, her body coiling, preparing to strike. The wind changed, blowing stronger from the south. The elk looked up, the wind blowing our scent its way and making it aware of our presence. But it wasn't just the scent of vampires on the currents of air. No, I could smell something else, something dangerous. And something out of place in the deep forest. A human. Almost in slow motion, I watched Bella's demeanor change absolutely. She caught the new scent and her attention was immediately focused. The elk all but forgotten. And then, more quickly than I ever imagined, she disappeared from sight, running toward this new scent, toward something so much more mouth-watering than animal blood. Human blood. I took off after her, struggling to keep up. With her newborn strength and speed greater than my own and the call of human blood drawing her away, I could only push self and pray that I caught up to her in time before she did something we would both regret. Bella blurred through the forest, swiftly moving toward her new target. I grimaced as I thought of the lt she would bear if she caught up to the human before I could stop her. I pushed myself as fast as my legs would carry me, but she was faster still, gradually moving out of my reach. Panic began welling in my chest as I mentally chastised myself for not making absolutely certain that there were no humans within our hunting radius. The freedom of running and the joy of watching her test the limits of her new body had distracted me and, ultimately, the unsuspecting human would pay the price for my negligence. I could already hear the unwitting thoughts of the hiker in the distance. His heart beat steadily, unaware of the danger that was approaching. The thrumming heartbeat pounded in my ears, filling me with dread. Another sound, a hissing, echoed through the trees and, by some miracle, Bella seemed to be slowing. I ran faster, not willing to let this opportunity to overtake her pass me by. Then, all at once, she spun around to face me, snarling and crouching in a defensive posture. I watched her carefully, lifting my palms to show that I meant her no harm. A newborn in mid-hunt could not only be dangerous to a human, but dangerous to me as well. Though, the threat of Bella harming me was the least of my worries in that moment. She stared at me for several beats before her body relaxed and her back straightened. I could see the strain in her jaw, a clear indicator that she was fighting hard against her nature. I lowered my hands and took a tentative step toward her. I have to get away from here, she hissed through gritted teeth. She has to. I couldn't hide my disbelief. I had never seen a newborn react this way before. I thought that her actions in the house might have been a fluke, but perhaps it was something more. Can you leave? I asked, still amazed that she was in a right enough mind to even have a civil conversation with the scent of human blood lingering in the air. Her ruby eyes flitted to mine before they narrowed and she sprinted past me in the direction we had traveled from. She seemed to be running just as quickly, if not faster than before, and I had to fight to keep up. As the scent of human blood diminished across the distance, my amazement grew. How was a newborn able to stop and think rationally when faced with such temptation? I always knew that Bella was special, but this went beyond all my expectations. Lost in my thoughts, I almost didn't notice when I passed her. She had stopped mid-stride and was standing stock still, a look of deep contemplation on her face. I jogged back toward her, placing my hands on her shoulders. I searched her eyes, seeing only Bella. Not the feral newborn we had all expected. How did you do that? You let me beat you before, didn't you? She accused. I shook my head, undeterred. Bella, how did you do it? She looked puzzled. Run away. I held my breath. But how did you stop hunting? When you came up behind me, I'm so sorry about that. She lowered her eyes, kicking up some decaying leaves with her toes. I gaped at her. Why are you apologizing to me? I'm the one who was horribly careless. I assumed no one would be so far from the trails, but I should have checked first. Such a stupid mistake. You have nothing to apologize for. Her wide eyes met mine again. But I growled at you. I fought the urge to chuckle. Of course you did. That's only natural. But I can't understand how you ran away. She shrugged. What else could I do? It might have been someone I know. Her cavalier attitude toward something that should have been the ultimate test of a vampire's control caught me off guard. But I should have known that she would be nothing like I had expected. Everything about her was an anomaly. After all the worry about her change, after all the concern that it would be years before we could begin an actual life together, it seemed that fate had decided that we had waited long enough for our lives to start. Relief mixed with astonishment flooded through me and I couldn't hold back my laughter any longer. Why are you laughing at me? She demanded. I stopped short, hearing the anxiety in her voice. I'm not laughing at you, Bella, I reassured her. I'm laughing because I am in shock. And I am in shock because I am completely amazed. Her eyes narrowed and she cocked her head to the side. Why, you shouldn't be able to do any of this. I threw out my arms in a wide, encompassing gesture. You shouldn't be so rational. You shouldn't be able to stand here discussing this with me calmly and coolly. And, much more than any of that, you should not have been able to break off mid-hunt with the scent of human blood in the air. Even mature vampires have difficulty with that. We're always very careful of where we hunt so as not to put ourselves in the path of temptation. Bella, you're behaving like you're decades rather than days old. Her eyes had widened as I rambled on and her look of confusion turned to surprise. Oh, she managed. I crossed the space between us and placed my hands on either side of her face, gazing into the fathomless depths of her eyes. She was an enigma, my own personal mystery that I may never fully understand. What wouldn't I've to be able to see into your mind for just this one moment, I sighed. She stared back at me and lifted her hand, her fingers tentatively caressing my face. I thought I wouldn't feel this way for a long time, she whispered, almost hesitant, but I still want you. Again, I found myself at a loss for words. Not only was a newborn, only hours into this life, rationally discussing her desire not to harm a human. But she still had not fed since she awoke and she was thinking about that. How was this possible? How can you even concentrate on that? I asked. Aren't you unbearably thirsty? She let out a sigh and closed her eyes. The muscles in her throat flexed with the reminder of her thirst. I stepped back, allowing her to focus her senses. Seconds later, she began running again, though not nearly at the full tilt she had run just moments ago. This stride was purposeful, yet cautious. I noted that she continued to travel away from the human that had nearly crossed our path. I chased after her, climbing toward the mountain summit. The trees gave way to more rocky terrain and I could already sense the predator she was hunting. My breath hitched when I caught a glimpse of the mountain lion perched in the nearby trees. As graceful as the cat itself, Bella lithely propelled herself into the branches above, giving her a better vantage point. She moved without effort, stalking her prey like the dangerous and beautiful predator that she was. It took a concerted effort to hold myself back, overwhelmed as I was by the urge to protect her. As powerful as she might be, the thought of her tangling with such a dangerous creature set my teeth on edge. She was focused intently on the hunt, her movements mirroring those of the lion. She was as graceful as a jungle cat and far more dangerous. Then, in the blink of an eye, she dove downward, landing on the back of the large feline. The lion's roars echoed through the forest, only to be outdone by the sounds of breaking branches as, together, they crashed to the forest floor. I secured myself against the trunk of a nearby tree, digging my fingers into the soft bark in an effort to hold myself there. I had to continually remind myself that she didn't need my help. Didn't need my protection. The sight of the lion's claws ripping her dress to ribbons was too much and I had to close my eyes to keep myself from interfering. The cat's roars turned to low groans before finally cutting off in a quiet gurgle. I allowed my eyes to open again and I saw Bella, her dress in tatters, a smear of blood on her lips and trailing the length of one arm. I folded my arms across my chest in attempt to appear like a calm observer. I muttered to myself. She glanced up at me, smirking sheepishly as she took stock of her appearance. I guess I could have done that better. She murmured. You did perfectly fine, it's just that it was much more difficult for me to watch than it should have been. She arched an eyebrow. It goes against the grain, I explained. Letting you wrestle with lions. I was having an anxiety attack the whole time. Silly, she scoffed. I shrugged. I know, old habits die hard. I like the improvements to your dress, though. I gestured to what remained of the gown Alice had dressed her in. The evidence of the venom's effects on her once human body were clearly visible, not a trace of the damage done to her by the pregnancy or delivery. She looked down at herself, grasping the hem of the garment between her fingers and sighing. Why am I still thirsty? She asked. Because you're young. She rolled her head to the side and sighed. And I don't suppose there are any other mountain lions nearby. I shook my head. Plenty of deer, though, I offered. She wrinkled her nose. They don't smell as good. Herbivores, I explained. The meat-eaters smell more like humans. Not that much like humans. We could go back, I teased. Whoever it was out there, if they were men, they probably wouldn't even mind death if you were the one delivering it. In fact, they would think they were already dead and gone to heaven the moment they saw you. She rolled her eyes. Let's go hunt some stinking herbivores. I chuckled and ran past her. She followed until we were side by side, sprinting through the forest again. It wasn't long before we came upon a herd of deer and, this time, I joined her in the hunt. Not only could I take the opportunity to sat my thirst, but it would keep me occupied so I wouldn't needlessly fret over her as she hunted. As the deer fell from my hands, I turned to look at Bella. She was staring at me. One corner of her lip curved up in a smirk. No longer thirsty? I asked. She shrugged. You distracted me. You're much better at it than I am. Centuries of practice. I smiled. Just one. I chuckled. Are you done for today? Or did you want to continue? Done, I think, she answered, folding her arms across her belly. Her face was pensive for half a second as she was once again lost in thought. Then her eyes met mine. I want to see Renesmee. I smiled and held my hand out to her. She grasped it eagerly and lifted her other hand to my face. I still couldn't wrap my mind around all that had happened in the last several days. My human wife had given birth to a miraculous child, I nearly lost her, and days later she awoke as a new vampire, but seemingly without all of the usual turmoil and mayhem that normally accompanies the transition. Electricity flowed from her fingers through my skin. Could we have everything we dreamed of having together so quickly? Could all of the waiting and concern over her transition have all been for naught? Warmth spread through me and the electricity sparked between us, as it always had, but now with even more intensity than ever before. She was beautiful, she was strong, and she was mine. I couldn't hold back any further as I wrapped my arms around her, crushing her to me, and pressing my lips to hers. I no longer needed to be careful. No longer needed to worry about holding back. Her fingers knotted in my hair as she eagerly responded to my advances. I held her tighter still, never wanting to let go of what I had nearly lost. All of the emotions that built up inside me while I waited for her to awake poured out of me, fueling my desire. She responded in kind, though she still didn't yet grasp the disparity between her strength and mine. The next moment, I found myself pinned to the forest floor, though I couldn't describe it as an unpleasant sensation. Oops, she muttered. I didn't mean to tackle you like that. Are you okay? I chuckled and reached up to stroke her cheek. Slightly better than okay. I looked into her eyes, trying to read her expression, to determine what she wanted. She had asked about our daughter. But my advances seemed to have veered us off course. Renesmee, I asked tentatively. She thought for a moment, her eyes clouded as she fought to decide between her warring desires. Renesmee, she finally agreed as she stood to her feet and reached for my hand to pull me up beside her. We began to make our way back to the house. Admittedly, even with the display of restraint during her first hunt, I was hesitant to have Bella so near our daughter, fearful that the blood flowing in her veins would prove too much of a temptation. Of course, I should know better by now to question Bella's abilities. She proved time and again that she was anything but conventional. She would prove us all wrong. Tell me about her, she asked, breaking me from my thoughts. How do you describe a miracle? She's like nothing else in the world, I replied. She was absolutely unique, one of a kind. How much is she like you? How much like me? Or like I was, anyway. I smiled, thinking of The traits I had mourned the loss of in Bella that now lived on in our daughter. It seems a fairly even divide. She was warm-blooded, Bella offered. Yes, I agreed, surprised that she would recall this fact when the first meeting between mother and daughter had been so tumultuous. She has a heartbeat, though it runs a little bit faster than a human's. Her temperature is a little bit hotter than usual, too. She sleeps, really, quite well for a newborn. The only parents in the world who don't need sleep, and our child already sleeps through the night. I chuckled to myself. She has exactly your color eyes, so that didn't get lost, after all. I smiled. They're so beautiful. Renesmee was the embodiment of everything precious and human that Bella possessed. It was as though her most perfect attributes were specifically selected and preserved within our progeny. And the vampire parts? She asked. Her skin seems about as impenetrable as ours. Not that anyone would dream of testing that. Although the thought of routine immunizations had passed through Carlyle's mind, only to be dismissed the next moment in light of her vampire heritage. Bella stared at me and I had to wonder what she was thinking. Of course no one would, I assured her. Her diet, well, she prefers to drink blood. Carlyle continues to try to persuade her to drink some baby formula, but she doesn't have much patience with it. Can't say that I blame her nasty-smelling stuff, even for human food. Emmett, more than anyone, seemed to thoroughly enjoy watching Renesmee thwart Carlyle's attempts, it often resulted in whatever he was offering being thrown back with foul consequences. Bella slowed, our joined hands impeding my pace. I turned back to her to see the confused expression on her face. Persuade her? She asked. I smiled. She's intelligent, shockingly so, and progressing at an immense pace. Though she doesn't speak yet, she communicates quite effectively. I watched Bella's face as she processed my words. Confusion and concern flitting across her features. Doesn't speak yet. Bella was deep in thought, trying to make sense of everything. If she were still human, I fear that this would all be too much for her. As it was, the confusion of the transition compounded by our unique situation, it was still a wonder she could cope at all. What do you mean, she communicates effectively? She asked. I think it would be easier for you to see for yourself. It's rather difficult to describe. She nodded, resuming our earlier pace. We walked in silence for a short time as I allowed her time to think. Becoming a mother and a vampire in such a small span of time must be quite a shock. Even though she had quite some time to plan for one, she was given little time to prepare for the other. Or for the possibility of experiencing both simultaneously. She broke the silence. Why is Jacob still here? She asked. My jaw clenched reflexively. How can he stand it? Why should he? She asked, her voice wavering slightly. Why should he have to suffer more? I'd like to make him suffer. Jacob isn't suffering, I replied in a clipped tone. Though I might be willing to change his condition. Edward, she reproved, pulling me to a stop. How can you say that? Jacob has given up everything to protect us. What I've put him through. The corners of her eyes pinched at the pain of the memory. You'll see exactly how I can say that, I murmured. I promised him that I would let him explain, but I doubt you'll see it much differently than I do. Of course, I'm often wrong about your thoughts, aren't I? She stared back at me and I wondered briefly if I had said too much. Did it matter? She would find out soon enough. Explain what? She demanded. I shook my head. I promised, though I don't know if I really owe him anything at all anymore. The space between her brows puckered. Edward, I don't understand. I reached over, cupping her cheek. I smiled as she leaned into my touch. Her confusion all but erased. Newborns are so easily distracted. It's harder than you make it look, I know. I remember. She frowned. I don't like feeling confused. I know. And so let's get you home. So that you can see it all for yourself. My eyes scanned down the length of what used to be her dress, now revealing more skin than it covered. After everything Bella had been through up to this point, we didn't need to add embarrassment to that list. I swiftly removed my shirt and held it out for her. That bad? She asked. I grinned. I rather liked the current state of her dress. But I didn't think Alice would appreciate the sentiment, and I doubted that Bella wanted to display that much of her new vampire body to our family, or to Jacob. She shrugged the shirt over her shoulders and buttoned it up. She looked up and smiled with a glint of mischief in her eyes. I'll race you, she said, no throwing the game this time. I let go of her hand and crouched in a runner's stance, grinning up at her. On your mark. Before I said another word, she shot off in the direction of the house. I ran behind, but quickly passed her. There was a clear distinction from the last time I had chased her. Vastly different than the frenzied hunt driven by her bloodlust. It wasn't until we reached the river that her newborn strength bested my speed as she launched herself over T. He river at twice the distance I could manage. Ha! She laughed as she reached the other side before me. As I sailed through the air, I caught sight of Jacob standing a short distance away from her. She had not turned to see him yet, but I feared what she might do when she caught his scent. I landed beside her, gripping the tops of her arms tightly. "Don't breathe," I whispered. She complied, but looked nervously around her until her eyes fell on Jacob. She stiffened slightly at the sight of him, no doubt her fears now matched my own. As much as I would like to harm Jacob, I didn't want Bella to bear that kind of guilt. Jacob stared across the space, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. "It's game time," he thought. "Carefully, Jacob," I warned. Leah's growl echoed my sentiment. "Maybe this isn't the best way. Please, you think it would be better to let her near the baby first?" He scoffed. "It's safer to see how Bella does with me. I heal fast, and I'm not willing to take that chance with Nessie." Bella's shoulders tensed and she looked nervously at me. I could see the panic and confusion in her eyes. I wanted to protect her from harming him, but if Jacob wasn't wary enough to protect himself, there wasn't much I could do. I shrugged. "It's your neck, I guess." "Stupid leech," Leah growled even louder. Bella flinched and lowered her eyes. She didn't understand my impatience with Jacob. But she would soon enough. She bit her lip nervously as she raised her gaze and stared across the yard at Jacob. Her body seemed to relax the moment he smiled at her. No doubt she was worried about how he would feel about her now that she had become the thing he hated most. "She almost looks like her, but man, look at those eyes." "I gotta say it bells," he said with a grin. "You're a freak show. Watch yourself, mongrel," I growled. "Oh, come on." "No, he's right. The eyes are really something, aren't they?" Bella replied. He nodded. "Super creepy, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be." "Gee, thanks for the amazing compliment." "Yup, that's Bella all right." He rolled his eyes. "You know what I mean. You still look like you sort of." "Maybe it's not the look so much as you are Bella. I didn't think it would feel like you were still here." He laughed. "Anyway, I guess I'll get used to the eyes soon enough." "You will?" Bella asked, surprised. Oops, I guess he didn't tell her yet. Gotta admit, I'm surprised. His gaze briefly flitted to me. "Thanks. I didn't know if you'd be able to keep it from her, promise or not." "Usually, you just give her everything she wants." I smirked. "Maybe I'm hoping she'll get irritated and rip your head off." "I'd like to see her try," he scoffed. Bella looked between the two of us. "What's going on? Are you two keeping secrets from me?" "I'll explain later." Jacob waved his hand dismissively. "First, let's get this show on the road." He uncrossed his arms, holding his arms rigidly at his sides and slowly started to move toward us. "He's gonna get himself killed." Leah edged into sight, clearly upset by Jacob's plan. "This could be bad," Seth whined, following closely behind her. "Cool it, guys," Jacob dismissed them. "Stay out of this." They maintained a wide distance, but still followed his movements, afraid to leave too much space between them. Bella shivered as he neared and she looked nervously at me. "Come on, Bells. Do your worst," Jacob dared. Bella stiffened and leaned into me. "Any day now. I'm getting older here, Bella," he teased. "Okay, not technically, but you get the idea. Go on, take a whiff." She looked anxiously up at me. "Hold on to me." I tightened my grip on her arms and she stiffened in a rigid pose, digging her heels into the ground to anchor herself. Her nostrils flared infinitesimally as she inhaled a tentative sniff. She paused before taking a larger breath and then relaxed. "Huh, I can see what everyone's been going on about. You stink, Jacob." I burst into laughter, amused and pleased by the results of Jacob's test. She seemed to have no problem resisting the call of his beating heart or the scent of his blood. And, as much as I wanted to harm Jacob myself, I admittedly enjoyed at least the insult on his behalf. She may have even more choice words for him when she discovers that he imprinted on our daughter. My laughter was coupled with Seth's and several others from within the house, all who seemed quite amused with the display outside. "Gee, thanks. Look who's talking," Jacob scoffed, pinching his nose dramatically. I wrapped my arms around her waist and nuzzled my nose in the crook of her neck. "I love you," I whispered. She was doing amazingly well and there was little doubt in my mind that she could see Renesmee without incident. I wondered errantly if there was anything she couldn't accomplish. "Okay, so I passed, right?" she asked, looking from Jacob to me. "Now are you going to tell me what this big secret is?" About that Jacob shifted his weight on the balls of his feet and his heartbeat increased. It's nothing you need to worry about this second, he edged nervously. I can't wait. Emmett laughed. Bella briefly looked puzzled before she was seemingly distracted by something. Then she whispered, Renesmee. She smiled, but then stiffened suddenly. I could see the concern etched across her features. Come and see, I urged her, squeezing her for reassurance. I know you can handle this. Her brow furrowed as she looked up at me. You'll help me, she whispered. I nodded. Of course I will, and Emmett and Jasper just in case. We'll take care of you, Bella, I encouraged. Don't worry, we'll be ready. None of us would risk Renesmee. I think you'll be surprised at how entirely she's already wrapped us all around her little fingers. She'll be perfectly safe, no matter what. She relaxed marginally and took a cautious step toward the house. Maybe this isn't such a good idea, Jacob worried. It might be too soon. He stepped in front of us, blocking our way. Are you sure, bloodsucker? He questioned, concern seeping into his voice. I don't like this. Maybe she should wait. Bella looked bewildered as her eyes flitted between us. You had your test, Jacob, I growled. I just don't think, but, Jacob began. But nothing, I cut him off. Bella needs to see our daughter. Get out of her way. Please don't hurt her, he thought as he looked pleadingly at Bella before turning and running back toward the house. I growled under my breath. It didn't matter imprint or not, Renesmee was our daughter and it was our responsibility to make sure that she was protected. Jacob should know that if I had any inkling that Bella would be a danger to Renesmee, I wouldn't allow her near her until I was sure that she was ready. For him to stay on my judgment as a father set my teeth even further on edge than they already were. Bella's confused gaze followed Jacob into the house and she looked questioningly at me. Shall we? I asked. She nodded nervously. I grasped her hand in mine and took slow, measured steps toward the house. Everyone was waiting just inside, all equally excited and wary for the meeting that was about to take place. Rosalie stood with Renesmee in her arms near the back of the room, strategically placed, no doubt by Jasper, with a buffer of everyone between Bella and the baby and the door just behind her in the case of a hasty or necessary exit. I fought the urge to growl when Jacob moved to join Rosalie at the rear of the room. Careful, watch her. What in heavens did she do to her dress? I don't like this. One false move and I'm gonna. I was thankful that Bella couldn't hear the stirrings of doubt and concern in the room. Though, seeing the look of wonder on her face as she stared at our daughter across the room, I doubted she would even take note if they voiced their worries aloud. She seemed transfixed as she stared across the small space. Renesmee leaned forward in Rosalie's arms as though she could force her way to her mother. Her wide eyes gazing questioningly. Bella continued to stare, likely trying to connect the child before her to the memory of the one born just days before. Renesmee seemed to be doing the same, running through the memories she had of Bella just after her birth and during the days while she waited for her to awaken. I was out just 2 days. Bella breathed. Renesmee wriggled in Rosalie's arms, struggling to reach out to Bella. Then she turned, placing her hand on Rosalie's neck, playing a series of images for Rosalie, questioning if the woman standing before her was indeed the mother she had been waiting for. Rosalie smiled and patted her hand. Yes, that's her, she replied. Renesmee stared at Bella a moment longer with wide eyes, recognition and realization dawning. As her mouth stretched in a wide grin, I stared, transfixed, as Bella and Renesmee took each other in for the first time since both of their births. I wished I could see into Bella's mind, to see what her thoughts were in this moment, but I could see the same sentiment reflected on her face in the expression and thoughts of our daughter. Both were in complete awe and adoration of one another. I was so focused on the emotion of the moment that it wasn't until I heard the alarmed thoughts of my family that I realized what was happening. Barely a fraction of a second had passed before I responded to the potential danger and firmly gripped Bella's arms to anchor her in place. Not a chance. Oh, please watch her. She would never forgive herself if something happened. Calm, careful. Will you stop overreacting? She's fine. Emmett and Jasper stood side by side, creating a barrier between Bella and the baby. Rosalie and Jacob had moved nearer to the door with Renesmee. Everyone in the room had instantly responded to Bella's movement as though it were a threat, myself included. But even as I held her in place, she didn't resist, didn't struggle like a newborn tempted by human blood would. The only person who hadn't moved was Alice, who stood with her arms crossed and a look of annoyance on her face. Oh, give her some credit, she scolded. She wasn't going to do anything. You'd want a closer look, too. She arched her eyebrow, daring us to refute her. Renesmee struggled anxiously in Rosalie's arms, reaching out for her mother. Bella was frozen in place, yet surprisingly relaxed. I could feel the rise and fall of her muscles as she breathed in the sense of the room without even the slightest hint of aggression. "I'm okay," she whispered, reaching up to pat my hand. "Keep close, though, just in case." She's remarkably calm, so unusual for a newborn. I loosened my grip, now knowing that the perceived threat was truly no danger at all. "Jazz, let us through. Bella's got this." Jasper's eyes narrowed. "Edward, the risk, I don't think she's ready for this." "Minimal," I replied. "Listen, Jasper on the hunt." She caught the scent of some hikers who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Oh, no, Edward, how could you be so careless? The call of human blood is too strong for a newborn to resist. It's in their nature." "It's to be expected." Gasps of horror echoed through the room, their thoughts turning macabre at the thought of Bella attacking a human. Some were horrified, yet others seemed remarkably unaffected by the news, as though they had been anticipating it. "Edward," Carlyle reproved, "how could you be so irresponsible?" I shook my head. "I know, Carlyle, I know. I was just plain stupid. I should have taken the time to make sure we were in a safe zone before I set her loose." Quote, Bella cringed, inching closer to me as the eyes of my family scrutinized her. "Edward," she whispered, clearly uneasy with the sudden attention. I grinned, eager to share with our family the extraordinary gift that Bella seemed to have been born with. "He's absolutely right to rebuke me, Bella. I made a huge mistake. The fact that you are stronger than anyone I've ever known doesn't change that." Quote, "Really, Edward?" Alice rolled her eyes. "Tasteful joke, Edward." I shook my head. I wasn't making a joke. I was explaining to Jasper why I know Bella can handle this. "It's not my fault." Everyone jumped to conclusions. Jasper inhaled a sharp breath. "Wait, she didn't hunt the humans?" "Impossible." "She did what? Did I hear that right?" "She started to." I paused, taking what could be considered far too much pleasure in the puzzled thoughts that filled the room. I could hear Bella's teeth clench, clearly not enjoying my penchant for elaborate storytelling. She was entirely focused on the hunt. Quote, "What happened?" Carlyle exclaimed, leaning forward with anticipation. I mirrored Carlyle's movements, leaning toward him for effect. She heard me behind her and reacted defensively. As soon as my pursuit broke into her concentration, she snapped right out of it. I've never seen anything equal to her. She realized at once what was happening, and then she held her breath and ran away. "No way. That's unprecedented. Impossible." "Whoa," Emmett mumbled. "Seriously." Bella rolled her eyes. "He's not telling it right," she muttered, shuffling her feet. "He left out the part where I growled at him." "That sounds interesting. Did ya get in a couple of good swipes?" Emmett teased. "No, of course not." Bella's expression was indignant. "Oh, come on. No, not really. You really didn't attack him?" Quote, "Emmett," she groaned. "Too bad. Ah, what a waste. And here you're probably the one person who could take him since he can't get in your head to cheat and you had a perfect excuse, too." He sighed. "I've been dying to see how he'd do without that advantage." "I would never," she exclaimed. "How can she be so rational? It doesn't make sense." Emmett should know better than to antagonize her. Any newborn would have attacked him for less. "Why doesn't she?" I looked over at Jasper and grinned, seeing his puzzled face. I tapped his shoulder lightly with my fist. "You see what I mean? Unbelievable." He shook his head. "It's not natural. She could have turned on you," Esme reproved. "She's only hours old." She placed her hand over her heart and reached for Carlyle's hand with the other. "Oh, we should have gone with you. I couldn't bear it if anything happened to either of you. Think about your daughter." Carlyle patted her hand reassuringly. Although a clear error in judgment, it all seems to have turned out. Though her reaction was remarkable, quite astounding. I wonder what could have caused it. Her preparation perhaps. I shrugged, answering Carlyle's silent query. We had no idea yet what Bella might be capable of or how she obtained such a level of control as a newborn. Perhaps we would never know the true cause, though I foresee many debates regarding the subject in the near future. "Edward," Bella implored, breaking me from my reverie. She was leaning around Jasper, trying to catch a better glimpse of Renesmee. "Please." Jasper's jaw clenched and he remained steady. "It's too risky. We can't allow." "Jazz, this isn't anything you've seen before," Alice whispered. "Trust me, she's not like the others." He turned to look at her. His eyes filled with turmoil as he struggled with the desire to believe Alice while everything he knew in his history with newborns warned him not to. After a brief moment, He reluctantly nodded and moved to the side. Bella took a step forward and Jasper placed a light hand on her shoulder, moving along with her. Even with Alice's reassurances, he still wanted to be prepared should something go wrong. We moved slowly across the room, blanketed in the aura of calm that Jasper was emitting. I wasn't certain if Bella was unsure of her ability or if it was the concern radiating from everyone else in the room that cautioned her to take things slowly. Renesmee struggled in Rosalie's arms and I could hear the frustration in her thoughts. Without warning, a high-pitched wail filled the room as Renesmee began to cry. The building aggravation culminating in a piercing crescendo of anguish. Instinctively, I moved toward her, as did everyone else. I reached for her cheek, peering into her eyes for any signs of pain. Though I already knew the cause of her distress. Rosalie patted her back soothingly, shushing her cries. Carlisle and Esme hovered like doting grandparents. What's going on? Is she okay? What's the matter? Jacob fretted. Is she hurt? What happened? His eyes scanned her, searching for the cause of her wails. He reached for Renesmee and Rosalie handed her to him. No, she's fine, Rosalie assured him, stifling the urge to roll her eyes. Every cry isn't cause to sound the alarm. She gestured to Renesmee who was once again reaching toward Bella. See, she just wants Bella. She wants me, Bella whispered. I turned around, surprised to see her still standing frozen in the spot where I had left her. She hadn't moved an inch. She looked confused in concert. Ned and I chastised myself for leaving her side. I returned to her, placing my hands on her arms, and gently urged her forward. She's been waiting for you for almost 3 days, I whispered in her ear. The room collectively held their breath while they watched Bella and Renesmee prepare to meet for the first time. Jacob was noticeably anxious and I wondered if he might try to take Renesmee and Ake a run for it, not that he would get very far. He was fortunate enough that he could still stand on 2 legs. Bella must have noticed as well. Jake, I'm fine, she reassured him. This is a bad idea, he thought. Frowning at Bella's confidence, Renesmee squirmed, continually reaching for Bella as they slowly inched closer together. Bella stared at her for several beats and I once again found myself struggling with the frustration that came from my lack of insight into her mind. I would have given anything to hear her thoughts in this moment. Though of one thing I could be sure, it was a moment we would both never forget. Preserved perfectly in our eternal memories. Bella reached over the final short distance and took Renesmee in her arms, cradling her against her. I fought the urge to growl at Jacob, who was so reluctant to relinquish Renesmee to her mother that he maintained his grip on her, ready to take her back if the supposed danger presented itself. I could hear the contentedness radiating in Renesmee's thoughts as she smiled up at Bella. I tensed as I saw her tiny hand reaching up toward Bella's face. Seeing her intentions, I tightened my grip on Bella's arms and braced myself for her reaction to our daughter's unique ability, that is, if she could see anything at all that she tried to show her. Though I could not see into Bella's mind, I could see the images that Renesmee was trying to show her. It seemed like a century ago that she caught her first glimpse of her mother just after her birth. How could only 3 days have passed? The waiting, the uncertainty about her transition. It felt like an eternity to me. But in this moment, our daughter was trying to connect with her mother in the only way that she knew how, by showing her the first memories of her that she had. What was that? Bella stammered. I was briefly taken aback. If Bella had seen what Renesmee intended to show her, then it would be the first time someone had been able to reach into Bella's mind. What did that say about our daughter's unique ability? What did you see? Rosalie asked. What did she show you? Bella looked puzzled. She showed me that. I told you it was hard to explain, I whispered. But effective as means of communications go. Well, what was it? Jacob asked. Everyone in the room seemed to lean in, waiting to hear Bella's answer. Me, I think, she managed. But I looked terrible. It was the only memory she had of you, I explained. She's letting you know that she's made the connection, that she knows who you are. But how did she do that? I shrugged. How do I hear thoughts? How does Alice see the future? She's gifted. Fascinating. It's an interesting twist, Carlisle mused. Like she's doing the exact opposite of what you can. Interesting. I nodded. I wonder. My mind began to wander as I pondered Carlisle's comment. Renesmee was, essentially, doing the opposite of what I could, but where I could listen to the thoughts in the minds of others. She put her own thoughts into their minds. The puzzling aspect was the fact that Bella could see the images she was shown. Since I could not read her thoughts and she seemed to be immune to others, like Arrow and Jane. Then how was it that our daughter's ability was able to penetrate her mind? Perhaps she had an ability akin to Jasper's where something she did caused an actual physical change in Bella's body rather than just in her mind. Bella always joked that her mind ran on a different frequency than everyone else around her. Conceivably because Renesmee is Bella's daughter, her mind too runs on that frequency. Though if that were true, I would be unable to hear her thoughts as well, and that certainly wasn't the case. I continued to puzzle, listening to Carlyle's thoughts on the matter as well. He was speculating on the genetic probabilities, on the possible chromosomal combinations that resulted in Renesmee's exceptional ability. And the thought occurred to me that, if my ability was reflected in our daughter, then perhaps an aspect of Bella's mind was reflected as well. If Bella had the ability to keep everyone out of her mind, the opposite of that ability would be that Renesmee would be able to access every mind. Fascinating, I thought, echoing Carlyle's sentiment. I remember you, too, I heard Bella whisper. I turned to see her pressing her lips lightly to the baby's forehead. Jasper held his breath. Careful, calm, not a good idea. That's like an alcoholic kissing a bottle of whiskey. Jacob shifted his weight uneasily. She's fine, Alice murmured. They really need to calm down. Bella won't hurt her. Haven't we experimented enough for one day? Jacob asked nervously. Okay, Bella's doing great, but let's not push it. Watch it, dog. He better not push her. I saw a look of irritation flash in Bella's eyes as she looked up to glare at Jacob. I could already see the wheels turning in her mind as her eyes narrowed. Jacob should have known better than to say anything. I could see the anxious glances exchanged by my family as we all knew the truth of Jacob's imprinting would come to light very soon. What is your problem, Jacob? Bella growled, pulling slightly on Renesmee so that Jacob, who was still holding on to her, was drawn closer. Bella studied his face as he stood nervously next to her. Just because I understand, it doesn't mean I won't throw you out, Jacob. Bella's doing extraordinarily well. Don't ruin the moment for her, I warned. I'll help him toss you, dog, Rosalie added. I owe you a good kick in the gut. Jacob winced under Bella's scrutiny, but didn't budge. He maintained his hold on Renesmee. The room was silent for several heartbeats, so quiet that you could almost hear the puzzle pieces clicking into place in Bella's head. Then all at once, she gasped. No, uh-oh, here we go. This should be good. I wrapped my arms tightly around Bella to restrain her and, in her shock, she released her grip on Renesmee. Just enough for Jacob to take her in his arms and step several paces back. Jasper edged closer to us, enveloping us in waves of calm. I could feel Bella standing rigid in my arms. It would take a lot more than Jasper's ability to defuse this situation. Rose, Bella spoke through gritted teeth. Take Renesmee. Oh no. Rosalie reached over and took Renesmee in her arms with no resistance from Jacob. They both took a step back. Rosalie stood behind Jacob with a slight smirk curving on her lips. Edward, I don't want to hurt you, so please let go of me. I hesitated, briefly debating whether or not I should comply. On one hand, I had been waiting for this moment since the second I realized Jacob had imprinted on our daughter. Yet, on the other hand, although Bella was upset in this moment, he might regret harming her friend and I would hate to be to blame for letting her. Better let her get it out of her system, bro. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Oh, Edward, don't let her hurt him. She must have sensed my dilemma. Go stand in front of Renesmee, she suggested. I dithered for a moment more before succumbing to her wishes and letting her go. Rosalie took several more steps back and I moved to stand in front of her. Bella crouched down and everyone took a decisive step backward, except for Jacob. He seemed to be frozen in place by the ferocity of her glare. Oh man, he's gonna get it now. Looks like I'm gonna win this bet. I knew she wouldn't react well to this. You didn't, she growled, taking several slow steps forward like she was stalking her prey. I couldn't help it. He backed up, raising his palms in a defensive posture. You know it's not something I can control, he reasoned. Bella's eyes blazed. You stupid mutt, how could you, my baby? Jacob stumbled awkward through the front door and down the stairs, but Bella matched his every move. She wasn't going to let him get away. It wasn't my idea, Bella. He pleaded. Please, Bella, it was out of my control. I didn't choose it. I've held her all of one time, and already you think you have some moronic wolfy claim on her. She's mine. I can share, he offered as he backed away to the edge of the lawn. Pay up, Emmett snickered, glancing over at Alice. She's gonna rip him a new one. Alice rolled her eyes and waved her hand dismissively. I chucked to myself, realizing that this, perhaps, was the first time someone had bet against Alice and won. Granted, she only made the bet because she wanted the chance to participate in a wager where she truly couldn't predict the outcome, but its significance still wasn't lost on me. How dare you imprint on my baby? Have you lost your mind? Bella shrieked. Jacob continued to back away from Bella until his was pinned against the trees, his options for escape drastically dwindling. It was involuntary, he insisted. I had no idea. She can't think I chose this. Oh no, not on my watch. Seth and Leah came through the trees on either side of Jacob. Seth whined and Leah's muzzle pulled back in a growl before she snapped her teeth in warning. I took a step forward, preparing to intercede if necessary, though it didn't look as though Bella would need any help from me. Bella snarled at Leah and took another menacing step forward. Bella, would you try to listen for just a second? Jacob pleaded. Please, Bella. Leah growled quietly. Leah, back off. You're only making things worse. Do you see the way she's looking at you? The last thing you need is for me to back off. Why should I listen? Bella hissed. Jacob's eyes widened for a brief moment while he searched for the right words. Because you're the one who told me this, he began. Do you remember? You said we belonged in each other's lives, right? That we were family. You said that was how you and I were supposed to be. So now we are. It's what you wanted. Jacob was correct in one aspect, but there was a vast separation between what was happening now and what Belle had meant at the time she said those words. I had the sinking feeling that turning her words around like that would only serve to infuriate her further. You think you'll be part of my family as my son-in-law? She shrieked. Bad move, dog. That was probably not the best tactic to use. Bella, that's not what I meant. It's not like that. Emmett let out a hearty laugh and even Rosalie chuckled a bit under her breath. For the most part, the thoughts of my family were a mixture of amusement and concern. Though I thoroughly enjoyed watching Jacob finally squirm under Bella's furious glare, I was apprehensive about exactly how far she might take this. Stop her, Edward, Esme murmured. She'll be unhappy if she hurts him. Jasper edged forward, preparing for the possibility of a fight. I held my palm up to caution him we needed to be ready to intervene, but didn't want Seth or Leah to see his advance as a possible threat. Jacob looked at Bella with wide eyes. I didn't mean it like that. No, how can you even look at it that way? She's just a baby, for crying out loud. It's not like that. I'm a protector, a brother, not a... That's my point, Bella yelled. You know I don't think of her that way. Do you think Edward would have let me live this long if I did? He gestured to me, shooting me a worried glance. Come on, back me up here. You know it's true you can read my thoughts. All I want is for her to be safe and happy. Is that so bad? So different from what you want. I had heard this argument before in his mind, though he seemed more afraid of Bella's reaction to the news than he was with mine. Bella growled loudly, undeterred by his appeals, though I was surprised that she had been able to maintain her composure thus far. Any other newborn placed into a similar situation would have attacked without thought, without taking the time to listen to Jacob's argument. Amazing, isn't she? I murmured to Carlisle. Amazing. She hasn't gone for his throat even once, Carlisle agreed. Simply fascinating. Fine, you win this one, Emmett groaned, realizing that perhaps Alice had won the bet after all. You're going to stay away from her, Bella hissed. What? No, I can't. I can't do that, Jacob pleaded. Try, she seethed. Starting now. She took another threatening step forward, leaning into a crouch to emphasize the severity of her demand. It's not possible. Jacob paused, collecting his thoughts. How can I make her understand? She has to understand. Do you remember how much you wanted me around 3 days ago? How hard it was to be apart from each other? That's gone for you now, isn't it? She glared back at him, either answering with her silence or confused as to where this train of thought would lead. Though, it seemed relatively clear that she had no qualms about sending him away now. That was her, he explained, pointing back to the house where Renesmee squirmed in Rosalie's arms, a forlorn look in his eyes. From the very beginning, we had to be together, even then. She was drawing me to you. I just didn't understand before. But it all makes sense now. The idea was intriguing, though the imprint manifested itself after Renesmee's birth. The idea that it was the driving force behind his infatuation with Bella did seem to make some sense. I had fought hard to win Bella's heart, and it certainly eased my mind a bit to know that there were supernatural forces urging Bella and Jacob together that were outside of my control. If we had known then what we know now, then we could have all saved each other a multitude of unnecessary heartache. Bella straightened a bit while she mulled over Jacob's words, but the reprieve from her anger was short-lived. Her body trembled as she growled again. "Run away while you still can," she threatened. "Come on, Bells," he pleaded. "Nessie likes me, too." Bella froze in place. Oh no, now he's done it. I told him she wouldn't like that nickname. The silence was deafening as we waited for Bella to react. Jacob's eyes grew wider with each passing second, the only sound was the increasing tempo of his pounding heart. "What did you call her?" Bella spoke slowly, her voice livid. Jacob shrunk back, taking a step backward.